You ready? Okay, it says we're live. I'm just gonna do a quick sound check. So I'm gonna test my mic. All right, test. And Andrew, if you want to test your mic.
Sure thing. Testing.
Okay, it says we're live.
Testing. Is everything good?
Wait for it to catch up. Quick sound check on YouTube. So I'm gonna test my mic. All right, test. And Andrew, if you want to test your mic.
Sure thing. Testing.
Okay, so I think you will have to make sure you
Mute the stream.
Yep, mute the stream.
Yeah, I just realized I was like, oh my god, it's all delayed.
Okay, so I think we're all set. All right, so welcome to the stream tonight. I'm going to try something different tonight. We're doing a guest stream with Andrew Sides. So another artist illustrator, and this is all new territory for me as far as just figuring out the tech to get this going. But we're just gonna do what we normally do, paint what we feel like painting, and keep it pretty low key. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Glad to be on board.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess we should probably tell people how we know each other. I think we met at EluxCon, right?
Yeah, EluxCon. How many years ago was that now? 3, 4?
Yeah, with the lockdowns, I lose track of the years.
Like my kid is almost 2, and it's weird to think that because pretty much one half of her life has been in the middle of this. Then before that, like, we had a bunch of other stuff going on as well. It's just the whole time of it has been weird and wibbly for us.
Yeah. I think it's been, I think it was like 4 years ago.
I think so, because I want to say we met when my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, came to LuxCon with me for the first time, and that was like, I want to say like a year before we got married.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember you were exhibiting. I just went to like check it out. A friend of mine had recommended it, and I remember going by your booth, enjoying your work, and then a year later or 2 years later, I did the booth for Fantastic Tanks, and then we caught up with that. But yeah, I've just been following each other online since then, and I love what you're doing.
Yeah,
it's cool work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been loving the live stream paintings I've been seeing, and I've been loving like obviously like the tank stuff that you've been working on as well.
Thanks.
Now, are you still primarily a 2D artist, or like what would you say your division is between 2D and 3D?
I'm definitely 2D professionally. I don't really take the 3D stuff into client work that much.
Gotcha.
If I do, it's like in order to end up with a 2D product.
Right, like as if you were generating something for reference or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, or like photo bashing. I don't do. I wouldn't call it proper photo bashing. I don't know what the right term is, but you get some renders and throw it in and paint over it, and it makes a nice base.
I think it's called like over painting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've done very little of that. I tend to, when I use 3D, like specifically Blender and ZBrush, when I'm not using it to make figurines for myself for giggles. I pretty much use like it's pretty much I use it as the equivalent of like what someone would use for a photo shoot, where it's like I don't overpaint it at all because I mainly work traditionally anyway for
Hmm.
the most part. So it's mainly there as like lighting reference or sometimes color reference. I've kind of experimented with using it as basically like my thumbnail to roughly to start to develop a more tight underdrawing on top of it that I'll then transfer onto an illustration board.
Hmm.
Uh, I need to get better at it. Right now, I kind of fight it, and uh, at the moment, like it's not coming out fluid enough. It's like still a little stiff here and there. Like it's very obvious, like that there was a stiff like 3D model underneath it.
Gotcha.
I haven't done enough to take it my own.
Now, um, what are your thoughts on that? Like, my my kind of gut reaction with 2D, 3D, photo bashing, all that kind of stuff, is that uh, I don't see any harm in having a different approach. But for me personally, like I I want to know that I made specific decisions and could do it without extra tools or anything like that. And I don't know if that's like a pride thing or something, or if it's like makes me feel like my hand has made this thing. you know.
I, I know people that do amazing stuff with that, with using 3D as like a base and all that, and I have
Hmm.
no problem with it. It's pretty much, hey, however you have to make it to get it done in the end, do that if you need
Hmm.
to. For myself personally, I'm a process and technique junkie, so I'm very much the sort of person that would rather. It's kind of like I want to learn how to build the chair before I sit in the chair,
Hmm.
and knowing that it's kind of like I don't have to use it if I need to, and I think this is partly because I come from a comics background where you really don't have time to noodle around with this kind of stuff. You just kind of, if you have a reference, grab it and go. Or in a lot of cases, it's you rely pretty much on what your memory banks are. I think a lot of that still follows through with me for illustration work. But kind of like what you said, it's a complete completely personal preference sort of thing. Like I have nothing against. I know some people are very like adamant, like no, this has to be the way, and it's I don't know. I think that's nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, maybe coming from the like the concept art camp, that's been so well established or accepted in that kind of group that you almost can't say like that's that's not real art or that's not the way to do it. And
Yeah.
I think it depends on uh, the desired the, the desired end result and the value um, that the end user gets. So like in fine art, you're making something that generally speaking is your kind of uh, creative offering that you want people um, to respond to, right?
Even that though, like I've seen. Oh, I can't remember his name. I want to say he's a. If someone watching actually knows who this person is I'm talking about, please correct me. I want to say he's a Russian artist, but he's a fine artist. He does these like abstract, kind, actually kind of similar to what you see a lot of people do for 3D renders now, where it's like abstract cyberpunk or like sci-fi settings kind of thing. He does the
Yeah.
same thing, but he basically he creates the illustration first in a 3D program, and that acts as his underbase. He
Hmm.
prints it out, transfers it onto the canvas, and then finishes it out in a acrylic and oil, I believe.
Hmm.
And that's his entire workflow. I remember seeing it on Muddy Colors. Oh gosh, some years back.
So, and he would like display that in a gallery or something like that.
Yeah, he's a gallery artist.
Yeah, I don't think that. Well, I want to be clarify that like I'm not comparing. Well, maybe I was making a comparison, but I'm not trying to say, well, it's done this way in one camp and done another way in another. Um,
Oh no, but yeah, I figure I think he is most definitely like the outlier. I think at least within that field, like concept artists are way more okay with that kind of thing, and even illustrators are getting more to there if they aren't there already. Because you think of people like I think Samurai uses some photo bashing within his work to really beautiful results.
mm.
And I want to say, do you know Chase Stone's work?
No, I don't.
He's a or they're a illustrator, and I think they've done editorial and concept work and book work of everything under the sun, pretty much. Um, but I think they're also a person that uses like 3D renders as a base, then pretty much like what you were describing, like uses as a base and then overpaints on top of it to achieve what they want.
Mm. Yeah,
Admittedly, I'm not super familiar with a lot of gallery artists, so maybe there are more that do that. I'm not aware of it myself.
yeah. Well, that's definitely not. It's not really my world. Like I did a little bit of that when I was doing. I went back to school to finish off a bachelor's degree. This was a couple years ago, and so that had much more of like a kind of gallery um, presentation, in the curriculum.
Mhm.
Um, and
Was that when you were doing the? I remember you doing these like abstract concrete sculptures. Wait, were they concrete?
no, uh,
I vaguely remember like it was shortly after we had met. Like I remember seeing you post up some like these abstract sculptures that were I think you had chiseled them out from
oh
a solid block or something.
yeah, that was. I think those were plaster, and then I did a
Mm.
alabaster block. That was
Oh, gotcha.
that was a lot of fun. I mean, there was something about just the physical, the physicality of chiseling stone. Like it just felt. I just felt so connected to what I was doing. And like you could just kind of. I don't want to say turn your brain off and just kind of go with it, but like there was so much more to that in terms of how you feel
Mm.
through the process and when you're done. Um, as opposed to getting off the computer after like 4 or 5 hours, then you just feel like beat up and strained. Whereas I mean
Yeah.
you would feel the physical exertion. Like your arms would be tired, maybe your whatever. But like it just is a totally different um, uh, physical experience. Which actually, speaking of which, I've been playing with VR over the past few weeks, and
Oh.
that is this weird mix. It's like right in the middle of, you're using your body a lot more,
Hmm.
but it's obviously it is not the same doesn't have the same feel, and that's partly because the benefit of it is that you can sculpt without gravity, you don't, or physics. You don't have to hold things in place and all that kind of stuff. And so there's like this like pseudo physicality to it. I don't know. That's kind of a weird way to describe it. But,
I've only done it once, some years back, and it was in Tilt Brush,
hmm
and like I only had like 30 minutes or so because it was like for a friend's birthday party. Another friend brought over her other friend, I think, is a software engineer or something. So he brought over like the VR headset that they have from work kind of
hmm
thing, and it was an HTC Vive.
hmm
So we were all kind of trying it out to see what it was like and stuff. And like me, I think I'm the only. I was the only artist at that party, and I was just like, yeah, I just kind of want to. Can you guys just give me like an hour to like
Yeah.
really play around with this?
Yeah, I do enjoy it. I mean, I think I was pleasantly surprised. I would say I knew that the tech was, yeah, obviously leaps and bounds beyond what it was on the last go around back in the 90s or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but I still didn't think it would be as intuitive as it is in terms of like just the feedback, that like I'm moving my hands, and you kind of get to a point rather quickly where you don't feel like um, it's like you start to ignore the interface and you're just like picking things up and throwing them, and uh, yeah, it depends on the app too, though. And
Right.
that is one thing that I would say I was pretty.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, so what sculpting app did you use then for VR?
So far, I have used Gravity Sketch, and I started playing with Quill, but with all the animation tools, there's just a lot more to figure out there. So I've only done like one session with Quill.
Gotcha.
Gravity Sketch, um, it feels to me like maybe just a very light version of an actual software package. Like an actual sculpting. Um, I don't want to
Look,
compare it to Maya or ZBrush or anything. It just doesn't have that depth at all.
the same robustness, but it does have, I guess, the same sort of feel.
Yeah, I guess
You're
what I would
like,
what I would say is that it's concerned with the same things, if that makes sense.
gotcha.
So like, Quill or um, Tilt Brush seem to be concerned with, Quill obviously animation, um, and if you take the time to learn it, it has this kind of community along with it where you can post um, your animations that you've made, and people can go into them and experience them in VR, which is a really cool idea. And then Tilt, I haven't used yet, but what I've seen from it looks like it's kind of in a similar vein in terms of there's a bit of a social experience attached to it as well, and it's like it seems to me that it's kind of gamified, if that makes sense. Like
Okay, because it has like a sharing capability or something like that, or would you
um,
just say just because a lot of people have kind of dabbled with it, so it's more geared towards like the regular kind of person to like pick it up and go?
yeah, that's kind of what I mean. That it feels to
Gotcha.
me like they're aiming at a broader market, which is smart. Not to just be this is just for hardcore artists or whatever.
Yeah. And I've seen some amazing stuff with tilt brush, like Goro Fujita. Yeah, is it Goro Fujita?
Yeah.
I think is his name. Yeah, like he's done some amazing stuff with tilt brush, and I remember when it was first coming out, that Sparth also had dealt with some tilt brush stuff as well, and he was making some pretty amazing, like, they are very like Sparth looking spaceship scenes and stuff where you're like, yep,
Designs, yeah,
it's, there's no loss in translation in here
yeah,
going on.
yeah. So what I've seen in Gravity Sketch so far is that yes, it's a lighter package, and it does seem to get how would you word it? Like it's really intuitive, and then when you want to do something very specific, then you have to get into like kind of editing the mesh, and it works differently than like Blender or Maya or any of those traditional packages, and that's kind of interesting. But it still slows down. Like the whole process slows down once you get into like, I need this edge to be perfect or something,
Yeah,
which I guess is just maybe there's no way around that. Like maybe that's human nature, like as an artist to be thinking, I just want the
yeah,
tool that like reads my mind and just does it perfectly,
just get it done. Yeah. Yeah, I think that is like the artist sort of thing. You're constantly fighting your tools one way or another, even when you're super used to them. We've all had that day where you're like, why can't you just, like you're yelling at your pencil, why can't you just draw the thing I want you to draw?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just looking in the chat here. This is Cameron. Cameron says VR sculpting feels really odd, but it's a cool perspective. Yeah, Cameron, I would say that the interesting thing with VR sculpting is that you have how many inputs would that be? Just between your XYZ and your rotations. So your physical location of your hand in 3D space, and then your three axes of rotation, times two, because you have both hands. So like one of my favorite tools in Gravity Sketch is this. I think it's called the ribbon tool. But basically, you draw a curve and then you just drag it, and it makes like kind of like a blanket, or if that makes sense, like a sheet. But you just have so much control over that curve based on where you're pointing your hands, which how you rotate them, how far apart they are, and you can get these very interesting complex forms very quickly. One of these days I'll do a stream with Gravity Sketch, but I want to get half decent at it, so that it's not a waste of everyone's time. Just see me like dig through the menus and stuff. But yeah, I think that's the biggest implication is that you have these multiple immediate inputs, right? So two hands, 3D space. I mean, going from a mouse and a keyboard to 2D space to represent a 3D model. That's the method now, right? With viewing something on a PC.
You know what's I don't know if you ever saw it. I remember seeing it at, oh, which convention was it? I want to say it was at New York Comic Con. I saw it once. And this was, okay, how old am I? And then let me think. This was probably like 12, 15 years ago, so.
Mhm.
I went to New York Comic Con. This was like a year before it. I think it changed hands and got really, really huge. Like it was already a really huge convention, but this was like a year before it became like on the same level as San Diego.
Gotcha.
But I remember there was this booth there, and at the time, like VR sculpting was not at all a thing in anyone's eye. Like maybe in the eyes of people developing it, trying to develop it, but clearly not in the mainstream like how it is now.
Mhm.
But ZBrush at the time was ZBrush. I want to say 3, like ZBrush 3 had just come out, kind of thing. Um, and they were advertising this crazy gimbal gimmick thing that basically provided a haptic feedback for your sculpting.
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine like a Wacom pen attached to a three-axis gimbal that was attached to this like robot arm that you would see it like like a desktop version of the kind of robot arm that you see at like an auto manufacturer.
Yeah.
And what it would do is like as you're sculpting or whatever, it would provide resistance, so it would make you feel like you were going over the surface. It was very odd and like it didn't.
It,
They let people try it out, and it's kind of like this is strange. And if you're already having like there's already that disconnect of being like, okay, I'm moving a 3D thing around in like a 2D space technically, but
mm-hmm.
now I have this thing that's trying to make me think it's 3D,
Right.
and like because especially like I'm used to working on a Cintiq. Um, you know, you have like basically your arms up in the air while you're trying to do this thing and move it around, and it's like very strange. It's very, very odd. I wish I could remember the name of it. I want to say it was called. I want to say it was called the Phantom something or other.
Hmm. It's interesting. I mean, you have haptics in most VR sets now. Um,
Yeah, nowadays it's like a very common thing. Like, you know, people have it where the fingers are all felt like all the fingers are registered and stuff, and you actually
mhm.
feel the thing when you pick it up.
It's interesting. I mean, I think that is exactly what I was saying as far as being really surprised by the intuitiveness of it, because I was expecting that like this
Yeah.
feels weird, this feels wrong, you know, but like um, my hats off to the developers that have been, and it's not one system or another. It's I think it's goes app to app, like whether or not they've exploited this technology in a way that is interesting and feels right and brings something new to the table. You know, um,
Mhm.
yeah, it is. It's an interesting world. I do think that there's a certain degree of novelty that I've got to just get past. Like, okay, at some point you're done playing and you ask yourself, does this improve my work, or does it improve my workflow in some way? Like, what's the value other
Yeah. Like
than
yeah,
maybe
whether
I just enjoy
it's a
it
good
more?
trade-off or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's legitimate to just say, well, I like working this way. It's more, it makes me feel like I'm using my body more, or it makes me, it's more immersive or something. You know what I mean? Like, those, I think that's
Yeah.
fair. Um, my goal um, in the short term, and I'm not, I'm reluctant to say goals because I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody said a goal without a plan is a wish. So, okay, my wish in the short term is to
Oh, I am nothing but wishes.
is to just do like a one shift. Start with nothing, no idea. Hop in, you generate your idea, and get your 3D sketch going. And by the end of the shift, have your printed 3D model in hand. That's
Mhm.
my kind of thing I'd like to get to with VR, just to see like how it goes and whether or not that's. I mean, I think it's realistic, but whether or not it's like valuable and something I want to repeat and keep doing.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it gives me a solid like target to aim for, rather than just I'm going to play with this VR thing, and isn't this really cool? It's like to actually have like a um, this is what I set out to do, and then this is then I actually have something to measure that off of.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm kind of interested in your I mean, I don't know how to ask this in a way that doesn't sound like, tell me, give me your CV or whatever. That's not what I'm asking. But I'm really
Oh,
interested when you post work, it's you constantly surprise me with like like I think the first stuff I saw from you was like a H.P. Lovecraft type thing, and
hmm
then you were doing I think you were doing like a traditional fine art figure drawing class, and then you do like comic stuff, and then I saw some concept art stuff. Like the styles and the methods and capabilities are like you're across the board. You've got all these different things. So I'm interested in
yeah.
how did that happen?
What's funny is like I would describe it as like I'm all over the map. But yeah, I think that's the nicer way to put it. It's like I'm very across the board. I can go anywhere. Um, you know what? So you know what? So my schooling background is I'm from comics. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and I studied sequential art there.
Hmm.
And the reason I studied sequential art there was because Florida Disney had shut down the Florida branch of the animation studios, and 15, 16-year-old me at the time, I was I don't know why, every time I think about this, I'm like, I really don't know what I was thinking, and like why, like no art, like no teacher back then kind of stopped me and said, hey, you can kind of still do this thing. But like my original plan was to be an animator, right?
Hmm.
So once Disney shut down the Florida branch of their animation studios, I mentally went, okay, well, I guess that is dead. I need to figure something else out. And originally, I had this whole plan of like going to Ringling College of Art and Design down in Sarasota and getting into their animation program through there because I knew they churned out a lot of really good animators and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I had this like weird mental thing of like, well, I guess I got to see what else is around. I looked at Ringling real briefly. At the time, I was not interested in illustration work. I was my number one focus was in terms of getting good at drawing. Like I just wanted to be really good at drawing.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of had that like a narrow, almost like too much of a tunnel vision towards that because I didn't learn how to paint until several years outside of college, kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
Um, and even kind of around that same time, like, is when I learned that I could start to really break apart into different styles and stuff. And that kind of came about because I was trying to learn how to paint. Um, so yeah, but I do remember like I went to SCAD. I saw their animation department first. Was not impressed at the time.
Hmm.
It might have changed. It likely has changed by then. I would hope so. But at the time, I wasn't impressed. Their illustration department, I remember being like, these are kind of cool, but I didn't see enough like drawing to really sell it to me to be like, yeah, this is the path I need to take.
Hmm.
Um, Meanwhile, I went into their sequential art department, and it's all line drawing, it's all black and white, and it's all like immediately like I could see skill on the page. So I
Hmm.
was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. Um, yeah, so enrolled in that, did all 4 years there. Right at the end of college, I realized, wow, I don't think I want to be a comic artist at all.
Hmm.
And I had this portfolio that's nothing but comic book work.
Well, what made you say that?
A number of things, mainly cutting my teeth on it. I kind of realized that it was one of those things like it was like a twofold thing. I realized like I didn't have the same amount of love for it as my peers did.
Hmm.
A lot of my friends were into superhero comics, which I had like zero interest in. Um, I was into I was into some comics, like when I think about it, like I think I was mainly interested in like Jurassic Park comics that were around at the time,
Mm-hmm.
or anything like weird sci-fi fantasy stuff that would float into my field of view that I would be like, oh, that looks interesting. I want to pick that up. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I had a very narrow love in terms of like what comics were. And I was kind of in this like just weird spot, which I guess is kind of the definition of my art career in general, um, where I didn't like enough of the same things that other people did to be like, yeah, I want to go into that field and explore it. But then I was also like, I don't quite fit into this other more niche field kind of thing.
Mm.
Like I know I had some friends that were doing some incredible stuff with within the indie comic scene, and I kind of realized like, okay, they're doing it because they actually love the medium, and that's how they want to tell their stories and stuff. And I realized like, I don't think I really like that. Like I it was kind of like my come to Jesus moment where I realized like, I really only came into this department because I wanted to learn how to draw. Uh, the medium itself did not matter to me that much. It was just more I wanted to get good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was one factor of it where I realized like, I don't really have the same devotion to this medium as others do. And then the other part of it was my style at the time was very cartoony, but it wasn't like cartoony enough for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was too cartoony for other things. Like it definitely wouldn't work within at the time it wouldn't have worked within superhero comics. Since then, superhero comics have gotten much more varied and all the better for it kind of thing. At the time, though, it was still very much like you kind of needed to draw like Jim Lee to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then
There's like
the
a house style too. Or at least
yeah, it
at the
looked kind of
time.
like an unspoken house style where it wasn't something that they mandated, but it was something that the editors were subconsciously looking for. Whereas like, can you draw kind of like this
Mm.
thing, like this realistic style? Cool. In that case, you're going to fit in perfectly for that. Um, and then the other thing that kind of killed it for me also was the pay, because comics is you have to really really love it to put up with a lot of the pay stuff for it,
Mm.
and I did not. So so funny enough though, I got out of college because I had this revelation like I want to say like 3 months before I graduated. I tried applying for some storyboard stuff. I got some indie film stuff to do storyboard work on here and there
Mm.
because that was an easy transference of skills. Where it's like, cool, this is the same thing as comics. I can kind of do that. Um, I was applying to animation houses and stuff at the time. Didn't really get anywhere with that. Uh, and at the same time, I was doing. Well, I'm applying for all this. I'm also taking on like these mercenary comic gigs just to pay bills. Where it's kind of like someone that was like, "Oh, I have an idea for this comic, but I can't draw. Would someone want to draw it for me? Here's what I'm willing to pay."
Yeah.
And it's most of those were not like drawing the whole issue. It's like drawing like 5 pages, like a sample
Yeah.
kit
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
send off, that kind of thing.
Like a pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was pretty much that was like my first year livelihood. Was I lived entirely off of taking on pitches and just being like, "Yep, if one of these take off, maybe I'll do something with it, with whoever sends it off or whatever. But if
Mm.
not, I'm just gonna keep on going." Um, and then I got into this web comic with I met this person that had this really neat idea that was pretty much up my alley in terms of subject matter and the world and everything.
Hmm.
And so I was like, yeah, I want to like do this webcomic thing. And that was it kills me because I liked the comic a lot, and he was a delight to work with too. He had nothing to do with how I turned sour towards comics. It was pretty much just me realizing, do I ended up doing that webcomic for like 3 years, and that was the thing that finally killed it. Where I was like, I can't keep. This is an insane workload for me,
Mm.
and around the same time, after about a year out from college, um, uh, gigs were not coming in as much as I would have liked at the time, and I was slowly going broke. So I took on pretty much what my current day job is, which is a graphic apparel artist
Mm.
within the fashion industry. And doing that, like, you're 9 to 5 every day. And then on top of that, doing comics, which I want to say my schedule at the time was like I would, do art during the day for apparel and stuff and all that. And that stuff is really more like graphic design. Uh, like I'm not going to get to draw a fish man or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything neat for something like that. It's more like taking style guide stuff from Disney or Universal and rearranging it onto a shirt to make it appealing,
Hmm.
or doing other things like that. Because like people like figures don't really sell well on shirts because that's kind of weird.
Right.
So it's all
I mean, because you are the figure. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
so how
Yeah,
does this flatter you, your form or whatever? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like a lot of the art that's made for that, I want to say is like the equivalent of like making like sticker art kind of thing, where it can work on its own in like an amorphous shape. It's not really like a strict confine of the boundary of it.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's it. So 40 hours there a week, and then on top of that, my comic schedule was because I was never good at developing a backlog. So it would pretty much be like I would always be like a week ahead of when the page would come out.
Mm.
So Monday I would, or no, Sunday I would read the script and thumbnail everything out. Monday I would pencil it. Tuesday and Wednesday I would ink it. Thursday I would letter it and color it. And then Friday it would go live. I would have Friday and Saturday to basically take a break. Um, and then Sunday I would have to start back and do that all over again. So it's kind of like, and those hours were like from 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. to like about 2 a.m. I would work.
Yeah.
So
That's
it was grueling.
yeah. That reminds me. I mean, there's definitely. I mean, there's a lot in there that you've said that I think about the satisfaction in your work and whether or not you love it the same way that the audience loves it, or the other people who are
Yeah.
making it love it. But that's one too for sure that I have. I like making art. I mean, I would say if I don't create, I'm not happy.
Yeah, same.
But in terms of like whichever specific industry you're in, there are definitely times where it's 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm like making myself a snack or coffee or something and going back to the office to finish something off, and I pause and I like just think like, is this really what I want? Like how how I want to do things, and obviously there's your choice in terms of like which jobs do I take and what do I what line do I hold as far as like family time and you know available hours and that sort of thing. And this is something that I've really started to spend a lot more energy on. Just saying, okay, this is what you can expect from me, and
Yeah.
that's what you can expect. you know, um,
Yeah, and that was kind of what that's kind of what set it for me. I like after about 3 years, I realized I felt like I wasn't getting better in terms of art, and I was still very much in the mindset of like I just want to get better at drawing, and I felt I wasn't getting better at drawing. I was creating a lot of shorthand and a lot of shortcuts for how my style at the time looked,
yes, yeah,
which is that is an important thing to realize how to do. Um, but it
but
also
to also realize that that is what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and it felt like it felt like it was to the detriment. Like I really had no time to grow as an artist and explore on my own. It was pretty much job A, job B, job A, job B,
Hmm.
and bouncing between the two. So after about 3 years, I told the guy that was writing it, I said, "Hey man, I'm gonna just step away from comics permanently. I'm so unhappy with myself in terms of like how I'm working and everything."
Hmm.
And he was cool about it. And I told him like, I don't want to like upset the apple cart or anything like that for you. So, feel free to use all the art I made for, if you want to resell it for on it as part of a PDF or something for yourself or any of your things. Because he's a writer. And I just want like, go at it. Like, I made all this stuff for you for your world, so have free reign on it. I don't want to like hamper it or anything like that because I like it that much.
Hmm.
So he was really cool about it. And I think I haven't talked to him in years and years and years, but we're still Facebook friends, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So anyway, uh, after that, it was just after that I kind of had a moment where I was like, I really don't know what I want to do style wise in terms of art. Um, it was at this point I realized like I really don't want to do comics. And up until then, I pretty much have only trained in doing comics, which meant that at least for myself, I haven't done any exploration of color or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I have no idea how to paint digitally or within traditionally, right?
Hmm.
And so at the time, I was like, all right, I'm gonna take a break, kind of figure things out on my end, and see if I can get some work. And so I remember I went to a LuxCon around 2012, and at the time, it was kind of like what I'm kind of doing right now. Like it was still very line heavy work, but then I would paint over it, kind of.
Hmm.
Um, Sort of similar to do you know Goni Montez's work
Mm,
at all?
the name doesn't ring a bell. I might
It's
recognize
very
it.
he does a lot of editorial stuff and a lot of I've seen a lot of his work for tour.com
Okay.
and everything. But it is like he actually he comes from the Atlanta version of SCAD, and I think he comes from the illustration department. I can't be sure. But yeah, his is like the same kind of thing where it's like a line art, very line art based style, um, and with like beautiful color and stuff over it.
Hmm.
So I remember like I developed like a portfolio for a LuxCon in 2012, and I was showing it around and stuff, and I got like some tips here and there. Um, Showed it to the art directors there, and man, the response I got to that was so deflating.
Mm,
Because I remember like one art director looked at it and he goes, "This is amazing stuff. I have no idea what to do with it though."
mm, yeah.
Which is, that's completely understandable from their point of view because, they have their product they're looking to slot things into and be like, okay, how does this artist fit into our product and stuff?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the time, like, I didn't know that, at least I never thought about it like that. So, like, hearing that at the time, I was like, oh man, I have to go back to the drawing board then and, like, rethink this whole thing because I don't know what I'm doing wrong then in
That's
terms
a
of, like, look and all that.
that's an interesting topic that comes up all the time in the kind of videos and podcasts that I have been watching. I think a lot of content, and this is just I'm just framing this for where we're headed with this, but like a lot of content that I see online is about like getting jobs, right? Um,
Hmm.
and there really is this like disconnect between your development as an artist, the development of your style, and getting work. Um, and I think you're absolutely right as far as like, they're trying to slot um, they're trying to get you to solve one of their artistic visual problems, right? And that is,
Yeah.
and it depends on what the company is, what that problem is that you're solving. It might just be manpower. We just need more people to pump out more frames for this, you know, animation or panels for comic books or whatever it is. Um, but I think what ends up happening with that is you end up, and I think this is what you're describing, is that you end up as like a practitioner of a style, right? Um,
Yeah.
oh, can you paint in the Warcraft style, or in like a I don't know what you would call it, but there is a very much like concept art style. It's like it's crisp and clean and uses the lasso tool a lot and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And
And, and at least for me at the time, I was fine with them saying like, you're not a good fit for our product. Like that's understandable. What was frustrating for me was kind of like I was trying to figure out how to slot myself into things. And yeah, God, even still, I'm now kind of doing that. Um, from a totally different angle now, though, or I guess similar. But yeah, even then, like I was trying to figure out like I can't like me myself. I can't see where I can fit this in. Could you give me not even like a laid out direction, just suggestions in terms of like where to look to see where I can fit this in? And yeah, I remember I got bupkis at the time.
mm,
Like no art director kind of had an answer for me. They're just like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But it's great stuff. It looks nice. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, looks nice though. It's not going to like pay bills for me.
well, just curious though, like what kind of sectors are we talking about? Is it like games or?
Yeah, at the time, I think the art directors I saw were mainly books and games.
Mhm.
Um, and it was kind of like I sort of knew that like art directors knew each other overall, like across various mediums and stuff too. So I was kind of like, maybe if one of them doesn't know where I could fit in, maybe someone else could have a suggestion
Mm-hmm.
or just say like, you're not a good fit for my thing, but maybe look into reaching out to this person because they kind of use a lot of people like this for that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I didn't get any of that. So anyway, 2012. So that was 2012. And the kind of the reason like I'm giving this whole roller coaster thing is because this is more or less how I've ended up being able to bounce around as much as I can because it kind of came out of necessity and then also came about for me just trying to figure things out.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I remember like 2012, I came back from that, feeling just really dejected and being like, I'm not really sure where I need to be doing this kind of stuff. Um, at the time, I started taking on some concept work here and there for like small indie games
Hmm.
that I don't think anyone has ever played or heard of, to be honest. Uh, Let me think. Yeah, and then around that time, I took I remember taking like a class over at CGMA,
Hmm.
um, just to kind of broaden my skills and be like, I was still like trying to figure out how to paint in Photoshop. So I was like, oh, like I'll take some classes at CGMA, see if I can pick something up that way. I I think around this point I realized that I had half an answer, which was like the one half of the answer was I realized like, hey, you don't think in mass at all. Kind of like how you've been painting tonight. Like there's no way I could paint that way. My brain just physically doesn't work that way at all. I have to think in everything in line first.
Hmm.
And I had an inkling of that in the back of my head, but I didn't know what the second half of that answer was, which is it's okay to be like that.
Yeah.
Plenty of artists, work with a line base, and you can develop out a painted look from that. Um, that part I didn't come to yet.
That is interesting how, um, see, when I look at your work and I see the variety of work, um, it makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that I've kind of been all over the place with my stuff, you know. But it's like we've been coming at it from opposite directions, like
Oh yeah.
you saying that about dealing with form or just painting light rather than working out the line drawing. That's something where I'm like coming from the opposite angle of like, man, I really need to like figure out how does this, how to crisp up this edge and really give this some more definition. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just funny that like that's like two sides of the same coin. I think.
Oh yeah. Even still, I'll admit I still can't really paint. I have a lot of techniques and everything to basically skirt around that issue, but I still have a lot of trouble being able to do a fully painted look. Even I don't remember if you ever got to see like my painted work up close, like my traditional work, but a lot of that is a lot of judicious like hatching and cross hatching,
Hmm.
kind of like small scale lion decker, where it it kind of blends all together from a
But why
distance.
is that
But
not a painting though? I mean, that is painting.
yeah, I guess like this probably goes back to me having that distinction in my head where I was like, I don't think in mass, and I still don't. So I'm kind of like in my head, I'm like, maybe it's still not painting as far as I know. At least I don't feel it is. Even though, yeah, you're right to point out it pretty much is for all intents and purposes.
I mean, I don't
Um,
know. I don't know who the gatekeepers are, right? That say,
yeah, the only gatekeeper is honestly me and my weirdo brain, and I'm
well,
only gatekeeping myself.
what would you like to see? I mean, I guess that's like there's something between beating yourself up, which I think we all do. It would be it's pretty rare for an artist to uh, just be like, I'm just so amazing, you know.
Oh yeah.
But there's a line I think between beating yourself up needlessly and just like seeing beautiful work out there, or just different work that is not necessarily, the skill level and the result might be to the same level of work that you do. It's just um, a different medium, or different approach, different art style or something. But anyway, it's like so easy to see stuff like that and just go, man, what am I doing? I'm doing it all wrong. Like I went down the wrong path or whatever.
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
And nowadays, when I see people on like Instagram and Twitter, it's very easy to be like, oh man, they think the same way I do or whatever, or like they approach things in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm not as isolated as I thought I was. At the time, though, I remember like when I went to LuxCon, I want to say most, if like not all, the artists there, I couldn't figure out how they got to the finished result they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the few that I kind of asked around, or like at least like looked at their books that I bought and stuff, like it was clear it was similar like how you were working, where they were massing in tone and all that and blocking in forms and values. And I was like, yeah, I don't quite get this yet. Like
Mm.
it was that case of like, I understand the theory of it, but it's not clicking for me on the practical level, where it's like I can't translate this yet into practical use for myself.
Mm.
So let's see. So 2012 and 2013, I got this is we'll be like a little personal on this. Like I had my first marriage and my only divorce in 2013.
Mm.
Like pretty much within the span of a whole year, maybe like a little over.
Mm.
After that, I was on my own for a little bit. I was on my own for, I think, the first time of my adult life. And around the same time, Watts Atelier started doing their online school.
Yeah. Did you do the?
And yes, I did. So like, and God, I don't even remember how it came into my like field of view at the time. But I do remember years prior to that, the closest painting system that ever made sense to me was Frank Riley's,
Mm-hmm.
and even like his figure drawing stuff and all that. And I was like, it's kind of like I was staring at it. I was like, this. I feel like this will make sense to me. It doesn't quite make sense to me right now. Bits and parts of it do, but not like the whole thing. I just need to. What I need to do is I just need to figure out as much information as I can from it. So I around that time, like around 2012 and before that, I was trying to Google as much as I can about Frank Riley and to like hunt down anyone that dabbled in it or like taught it or anything like that. And I think that is probably how I came across Jeff Watts.
Mm.
But yeah, I saw them advertising that they were launching an online school. And I figured, like, well, I've got a lot of free time on my hands now. I might as well do this. So I enrolled, and I went into it in my mind with the stated goal of like, at the time, I had a very cartoony style, and I was like, I need to break out of this. I need to learn how to paint more realistically,
Mm.
if I want to get anywhere. I was still kind of smarting from the art director comments, even though they're very benign, like not at all really hurtful. Just
Yeah, they weren't trying to hurt
you
you,
know,
but
yeah,
it
they weren't
was
hurt. They were,
not
yeah,
what
they
you
weren't
wanted to
hurtful at
hear.
all. Yeah, exactly. And it's just something that like stuck in my head, where I was like, man, I can't believe this for myself. So yeah, I ended up enrolling in the Watts Atelier for about 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And during that, like, I learned how to. They were probably the first people, the first people to explain how to establish form into a painting for me. Mainly because like the way that they teach it, and I think it's the way that Frank Riley kind of taught it too, where shadow mapping and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It sounded very similar to like spotting blacks,
Yeah.
which is what you do in comics. And I was like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. Um, like this totally changes everything for me. Like at least I understand this and I can carry this through.
Mm.
So I at the time I was still very much in a like I want to become like a mass kind of thinker in terms of painting and all that. So I took up oil painting. I learned how to oil paint. Because that's what they teach at Watts and all that.
Hmm.
Um, learned enough to be a monkey with a gun. I was, I learned enough to be dangerous.
That's a funny way to word it.
Yeah, I forget where I heard that, but it was like, so if you're like a monkey with a gun, you have the capacity to inflict harm, and you don't have the knowledge to know not to.
Mm.
And so that's always my kind of go-to for like that awkward spot you can be in learning where you know just enough to be like capable, but not enough to be like to realize like, hey, you're not quite there yet,
Mm.
kind of thing. Um, so I was learning how to oil paint. I assembled another a holding portfolio at the time with my oil paintings, and I took them to a LuxCon
Hmm.
again, and that was 2015, I think. Yeah, I want to say it was like a year before we met. Um, and at the time, I wasn't looking for work. It was kind of like if it happened, it'd be cool, but I'm not really looking for that. I'm looking for advice in terms of like how to paint and all that.
Yeah.
And so, I was asking illustrators, anyone that would kind of give me the time of day, which pretty much everyone does, because everyone at LuxCon's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a cool.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I got a lot of great advice. The main takeaway I realized was I have probably about if I want to get like competent at this, I need to like devote another about like 5 years of learning how to paint in oils to be up to snuff.
Mm.
And at the time, I was like approaching my 30s, and mentally, I was like, I don't want to. Which is funny because like now it's like 5 years later, and I'm still trying to get into some things. But at the time, I realized like, man, I really would rather. I don't want to be stuck in that 5 year like time cycle trying to figure this out and maybe not get there because oil painting like I kind of understood, but there was a lot of things about it that I was like, yeah, I don't really quite understand this. um and so I remember like after LuxCon I sat down with like a giant illustration board and I just started doing a bunch of different styles in oil, and I was like, and that was kind of like when I realized what I liked and what I didn't like I realized I liked how to I liked being able to work and have my lines show through because I felt like I was a pretty competent draftsman compared to being a painter.
Mhm.
I guess similar to like how Robert Fawcett works, where he is very much like he's kind of like someone that would be like I can't really paint, but I can draw like crazy.
Mm.
Yeah, so I remember like I just sat and did a whole bunch of oil paints on this one large illustration board, just trying to figure out different styles and stuff. Um, around the same time, I met my wife. Well, we knew each other for years before that, but we started dating around that same time.
Mm.
I started working on this video game for Gearbox Interactive called Battleborn. Have you ever seen that? It,
I
it,
not
it,
off the top of my head, sorry, but
oh yeah, that's fine. Honestly, it came out at the same time that Overwatch came out, and it was the exact same kind of game.
gotcha.
And it was one of those things where it's like the work that I did on it, like I was part of a team that we were contracted by Gearbox to do all their cinematics for it,
Hmm.
and so I was a layout artist on that, and it was great. Like I'm still in touch with those guys and stuff. We did like a few other things after that for other video games that were smaller fry and all that. But yeah, it was just one of those things. Like it came out at the same time as Overwatch, and it was the exact same kind of thing. And Overwatch had much more appeal to its design and everything than Battleborn. It stood no chance,
Mm.
and I think it's actually defunct now.
I think that's a hard thing with those, especially just this industry of your work it's wrapped up in a a bigger IP,
Oh
and
yeah,
it is business, right? So like all of those things, like release dates, all that kind of stuff, that can make it or break it. And of course, you don't want to like. I'm not saying that as a like. Well, that's those are the things that decide. It's not really about that. It's more like how we get wrapped up in them and how we feel about the work, and then it's like and then it's overshadowed by something else that just the timing and everything else um, worked
yeah.
out that way. Yeah, it can be rough.
And at the very least, like I remember when the reviews came out, like I want to say most critics had panned the gameplay aspect of it, but one good thing was no one had nothing but praise for all the cinematics, and I was like, yeah, we did those at least.
Right.
Everyone
Yeah.
likes the thing that we did,
Hmm.
and so I had no qualms over that. Um, trying to think, God, where am I on this train of thought? Oh, so yeah, I did that. I was doing. We would do like nightly sketch jams and stuff after work. That was back. That was pretty much doing the same thing where it was back to like an 8 to 2 work schedule during most nights to get that kind of stuff out for Battleborn. But it was also it felt less stressful. I think because I was doing it with other people and all that, and we were frequently within Skype chats and all that, like on calls, talking to each other and hanging out. We'd have movies playing on in the background.
Hmm.
And it was much more. It felt easier being in the middle of the trenches with someone, with a group of people during that.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, anyway, I around the same time I realized I was still kind of futzing around with oil paints, but I kind of realized like I really didn't like how I didn't like several things about it. I didn't like how it felt in terms of drying time, workability, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I was fine with digital, and I had no problems doing it for work or whatever. Someone hired me on for something like that, but I wanted at least like personal work to be traditional, just because I'm still a sucker for that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I was trying to figure out like, man, how do I switch this up again? As if I haven't switched up enough already. And that's actually when I made the switch over to how I work currently, which is a mix of gouache and acrylic and some colored pencil in there too.
Hmm.
And it pretty much it ticked all my boxes. Like I got to have the line art show through in my finished work. I it had a quick working time, so it's a pretty fast style. I want to say like a 12 by 18 painting I can turn around within from the start of the when I'm not meandering on it, like if I really had to knuckle down and all that, I could probably turn it around within 3 days ish
Hmm.
and have it be like fully finished and look how I want it to look and all that. Whereas I know with like oil, it would have taken me, at least for me, would have taken me much longer.
Yeah, you gotta
Um,
work. Yeah, work into it.
yeah, even with like liquid and stuff, like doing things like a glaze. In acrylic, you can do the glaze, and then like within 20 minutes, you can come back to it and keep working on it.
Yeah,
With oil, it's like you do the glaze, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm done for the night.
right.
I'll see you tomorrow morning.
I have I have tried to speed things up a little bit. You can with
Yeah,
uh,
with like liquid and all that, right?
yeah, and um, you can speed drying with an oven, but
I've heard about that. Yeah, I've heard of some of my friends doing that, and
I wouldn't
it
recommend
sounds
it.
crazy to me.
If you had like a studio with a dedicated oven for that, then that's something, and it's vented. Um,
Yeah.
but no, not.
Oh, yeah. I feel the same way with the Sculpey, where I used to cook it in like when I was in college. I used to cook it in like our oven in the apartment. Um, and eventually I got like an old toaster oven just to cook smaller parts or whatever in it.
Right.
Um,
At some
yeah,
point,
yeah,
you realize
yeah. You kind of realize, like, this doesn't really like this probably isn't good for me.
I wanna live.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I started doing like the acrylic stuff, and it's kind of like where I'm at now, where I still have the day job as the apparel artist. I'm trying to move out of that now. I've kind of hit a point where I'm just done with it mentally, and I just want to move fully into freelance.
Mm.
I still do like smaller jobs here and there. Occasionally, like a larger one comes by for me for freelance. Um, I've been trying to get the traditional stuff going more. It's more receptive. It's definitely gotten better reception than my past work. Uh,
Like at shows and that sort of thing, or like online.
yeah, yeah, or at least like in terms of feedback and response, and within shows, like people. Actually, what's funny enough is a lot of people at comic conventions and stuff are usually amazed that they're traditional.
Mm.
They always think it's digital at first.
Mm.
Um, I guess it's just like the way it looks and stuff, and they're people are kind of trained to assume that something is digital nowadays.
Yeah, especially with your like kind of clean line work stuff. You would just
Mhm.
assume, okay, that's done in you know Clip Studio or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah. And oh gosh. So when we first met, I got a good or no. Sorry, no, 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 not when we first met. So well, yeah, we'll go there. So when we first met, I did get a good response to my work at the time. They just wanted to see more, which cool. That's a pretty good response. I'll take that. Um, that's kind of like the standard sort of thing that you would hope to get is we want to see more.
Hmm.
Uh, so developed some more stuff to show. Um, Came back right before COVID and showed it to some more art directors and stuff, and got a similar response where it's like, yeah, we want to see. Can you show us some more stuff? And this time it's more like, hey, this is the kind of thing. Like Lauren Panapinto had a really great advice for me, which was at least for like book covers, which is what I was trying to get into, which I'm still trying to get into. She told me like, with my style, it's not a safe style. So subject matter wise, I should hew towards, at least for like book cover samples, I should hew towards showing safe subject matter. Um, and then pair it with the weird style, because it's kind of like you can go weird with the style but safe with the subject matter and win people, or you can go safe with the subject matter but weird with the or sorry, safe with the style but weird with the subject matter and win people. But if you do weird for both of those, then you get a lot of people turned off because they're not really sure what to make of it, you know?
Hmm. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, and I was like, and that might only be applicable to book covers. I do think there is some merit to that in terms of how to think about it overall with that kind of thing for anyone that's trying to figure out how to do illustration work and what's considered like appealing. Um, there does need to be like a level of recognition. Like someone needs to be able to recognize something within the work. That's kind of like why a lot of people get drawn to existing franchises over something new.
Yeah, it's a familiar
Where they,
thing, right? Like
yeah,
I
exactly.
know what to do with this, right? I actually I'm really running into this with Fantastic Tanks in a way, where we've been working on different ways to solve this problem, and the problem is people see it and they like the art style and they like the idea and the humor and everything, but then the question is always, so how do I play this, or like what is like what is this? Um, just having the like intellectual property or the idea or the artwork alone, that's I'm reluctant to like just define like, well, this is what defines art or whatever. But like if you're in a like a gallery space, that's like art for art's sake. Like it's just the art. But when you start to get into a product where people want to interact with that thing, they don't want to just say that I own it or it's on my wall or whatever, and not to downplay decorative art, but you have to understand, you have to like have an understanding of what this thing is and how I interact with it. um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Like
it's the
you
familiarity.
gotta have some, yeah, you gotta have some level of knowing what to do with it when you see it. Like, and I guess that is what creates. Well, I guess that's that definition of what appeal is to people. When people can instantly see how it fits into their life.
Hmm.
And anytime it takes like a little bit for them to figure it out, that's when you kind of start losing people here and there. Um, but when they see something that, if it's a franchise, like uh, this artist that goes to MegaCon, which is a local convention for me, and actually I think Muddy Colors just featured him on a blog post not too long ago. There's this artist named Attack Peter. He does these lithographs that kind of look like uh, almost kind of like that tiki style look of art that you see in like some older uh, illustrations, that kind of thing. But he does it with known franchises like Hellboy, Godzilla, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I think because it's those kind of subject matter, like everyone can instantly recognize and be like, "Yep, I know, I know exactly what that is," and you either like it or you don't. But at
Right.
least like there's a lot of appeal because they're like, "Oh, I like that franchise. That's an interesting way of presenting it. I've never seen it done that way before."
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's kind of what is going on there. And so like within my case, I'm now running into, and it's kind of what like I'm gonna try and probably work on this a little bit tonight. We'll see. I'll get back to it maybe once I stop doing these Fishman sketches. Um, where's it going with my train of thought? Oh, anyway, so that's where I'm kind of struggling with right now, which is figuring out what subject matter I can paint that kind of meshes well with my style to because like the stuff I've been painting so far, which is like weird fiction, horror stuff. I like that personally, and certain pieces jive really well with people. Some pieces that I would think would hit hard don't.
Hmm.
So I'm still kind of trying to figure that out, at least for personal things where it's like people like buying originals and that kind of thing. And I'm also now trying to figure it out for professional work as well, where it's like I just need to develop like a portfolio body that shows like, hey, I can do kind of like safe stuff, but in this style, which can help stand like help you set yourself apart from the other people on the bookshelf kind of deal.
Hmm.
Um, so, anyways, after we last met each other in 2019, and I had that whole thing, I actually got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I had to get it removed. Like I want to say, like a week before the lockdown started happening.
Hmm. I recall uh, a conversation with you around that time. That was like,
Yeah,
or it might have been a couple months after, but like, man, that was
yeah,
just
something like that.
that just sounds awful. Yeah.
It was. I was really glad to get it out because like in the lead up to that, like even at a LuxCon, it was giving me all these like terrible symptoms. Like at a LuxCon, I was pretty much every morning I would wake up like incredibly sick, and I needed to like basically eat something to just get something into my stomach to basically to quell it down.
Hmm.
Not sure what that was about. Actually, well, I kind of I do know is because the tumor was like putting pressure on my brainstem and like causing these like crazy headaches and all this nausea and stuff. And because it was growing off of my acoustic nerve on my right side, it was affecting my balance and my inner ear, like your stabilizer more or less.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was like what all that sickness was. But then, anyway, 2020 pretty much like because of that surgery and everything, and just with everything else going on, like I was tapped out. Like I mentally just hit a wall and stopped for a little while.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like at the end of 2020 was when I finally started kind of getting back into a groove. And I kind of still feel like I'm getting a little bit out of there because I definitely don't feel as fast as I used to be, um, in some regards. Um, but I think that's a temporary thing. I'll slowly get better with it as I get more used to it again,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
hopefully as things improve in the world.
it's partly a question too of like, um, what do you want out of your creative endeavors? You know, like you.
Oh yeah,
I don't remember exactly at what point you were talking about your journey, but it reminded me that like yeah, with my stuff, when I decided to go back to get the bachelor's degree, which is funny, it's like I'll keep this brief, but like I had just had a conversation recently with one of my professors at the school there, and just like thinking, I more or less consider myself self-taught, but I've had all these different experiences with schools and with different mentors and stuff. That you can never really say that you truly are. But anyway, this past school that I went to, just it was at this time of just kind of this reset of like, I kind of want to stop doing what I'm doing. Oh, it was when you were talking about having your kind of shorthand for your work. It's like you you know it works in certain circumstances. You know, it's like, okay, if I want more contrast, or if I want this, this part, this region to pop forward in space from the region behind it. You use these little techniques, and those aren't the techniques that you have to use every time, but because you're like on this fast production cycle, that's what you just end up doing all the time. And so the growth, it's really hard to feel any growth when you're doing the same thing all the time. So that was what I was feeling, and I just thought, whether I'm taught anything or not, I'm gonna like stop doing what I'm doing and just kind of get out of this funk. But I think coming back to what you were talking about, or at least the responding to that, I do think that having stopped the freelance stuff for a while, and I think I took like a year and a half.
It helps, like it helps you like center yourself.
Yeah, it really changes the way that I think about what I'm doing. Like, I don't, I don't think that I have the pretense of like oh, this, like I'm not wearing a beret and putting this thing in, putting it up in the New York Museum or something, or not museum, gallery. Not to mock anyone who does, but like I don't think of this as like what I do as high art, but I really think about what I do and why I do it now, which I wasn't before. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing at all. I was just doing it because I, like you said, wanted to be good at something, wanted to be good at painting. I was always attracted to games and art and that sort of thing. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I never really stopped to ask why, and what it was in each kind of piece that like gave it any. I hate to say like gave it a soul or whatever, but like, why is this my work? Like, why is this what I choose to do? And so anyway, what you said made me think of that, just because the feeling of wanting to improve, I think that's a really good thing. But there's like this, I think there's some like underlying values in that, that for myself, I have to think about often enough. Like, well, why do I want to be faster? Why do I want to do, 3D stuff? Why do I want to do VR? Is it to be cool, or is it because the cool kids are doing it? Or is there something for me, like my curiosity or my
I would
desire
say,
to grow? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, like, I would definitely say, at least for me, it's definitely that latter thing. That was something also I kind of realized around the time when I was trying to figure out, like after like me trying to experiment with oils and stuff. Like, I am a very curious individual when it comes to art things, and that was kind of when I realized, like, that drive to try and get better at drawing. It's at the time I thought it was just that, but it really is just more like I want to figure out how things work. It's the same reason, like, I still have like the ultimate goal to be able to never use reference.
Yeah.
As psychotic as that sounds, in my head, I want to be like, I want to have enough of a visual vocabulary to where if you asked me, can you take this figure and can you spin it around like 170 degrees? And also we want to have it, instead of a top-down view, we want to have it be like a worm's eye view and all that. Like, my response is, oh, no problem, it's like this. And that was the same reason, like, I started doing teaching, or at least why I was taught that one workshop. I'd like to teach some more. Just now that we have a 2-year-old, it's hard to find the time for it and all that.
Mhm.
Maybe online though. I started considering like possibly looking into doing what you're doing, like YouTube live streams or like making videos for patrons on Patreon and all that.
Mhm.
Just to kind of get out there, because like that's another thing I like is I'm have no problem sharing information and spreading it around. And I'm at least more interested in being like, hey, like I want to show you the cool thing that I figured out of how this works and how you can use it to your advantage versus just like, oh, I want to teach you because it's an ends to a mean kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the reason, like I ended up at Blender because I picked up ZBrush to learn how to make dinosaur models because I was like, oh, I want to have like some dinosaur figurines for myself just because I felt like there was not enough like cool dinosaur figurines out in the world,
Yeah.
or at least ones that I could afford. So I
Mhm.
was like, and everyone kind of does like these, at least like within the dinosaur model kit universe. A lot of people do like larger scale models, like 120 or 130, or sorry, 120 or 115, which depending on the species, you're kind of looking at like an 18-inch model in some cases.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's kind of, yeah, that's neat. But you know what I also kind of like is I like doing dioramas and stuff. How do I do that? And so I have this like weird through line where I was like, I learned ZBrush first to figure out 3D printing and how to sculpt and all that,
Mhm.
which ended up leading into like jobs for doing that kind of thing just because I was sharing it around and stuff.
Yep.
And then it led into like some concept art stuff here and there. But then, you know, I started selling those on like Shapeways to be like really just for me to order them myself to be like, hey, I want to make these into like dioramas for myself. And then when I realized like, wow, these dioramas take up some space in my house and I only have so much physical space, I started learning Blender again so I can figure out how to do things digitally and like create like scenes and all that.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's kind of like that. I just kind of bounce around figuring things out as I go along, and that's the same thing with like 2D art where I'll see something I like and I'll spend time dissecting it and trying to figure it out. Um, I did that trying to figure out how to paint and all that. Like, do you know? Excuse me, getting a little hoarse. Do you know the artist? His real name is Alexander. I'm going to butcher his French name. Dibione, I want to say his last name is, or he goes also by Zedig on DeviantArt and all that.
I don't think I do know that.
I'll have
I
to.
don't recognize the name at least.
I'll have to. I can show you later or something. But he has this very interesting like paint style. I was like, when I first thought, I was like, oh, I want to figure that out. And yeah, I spent like a week just like trying to replicate his style, which is like really, really different from me.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like a lot of he works like digitally, so it's a lot of like that's actually how I learned about like clipping masks and all that
Mhm.
because he uses them a lot.
Yeah.
And I realized like, wow, this is a game changer. This is like a huge thing for me, like in terms of like how to work my workflow within Photoshop now. Now I pretty much I use clipping masks like all the time for stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of how I've ended up like getting my education is I just figure out I see someone that does something cool and I want to figure out how they do it. Um, I did that with kind of to get like to where I was with my style or get close to it. I think it's still evolving a lot right now. But I remember I was trying to figure out how Drew Struzan and how someone like CF Payne puts together a painting because they're like really different from other artists. And I was trying to just, and it was like something I wanted to do. Like it was kind of within my wheelhouse. And I was like, yeah, I want to see like, how do they do that kind of thing? So, digging up like old magazines and trying to find whatever videos you can about it.
Yeah, that's a funny thing to me that I realized not too long ago. I mean, I have, maybe laziness is the right word, but like there are a lot of artists whose work I admire,
Hmm.
but have not taken the time. I mean, for one, it's like you've mentioned several names that like I don't know, and I could tell you for certain that like even the greats, I had no idea. Like I would just like look at something and go, I like that, you know,
Hmm.
that's a cool piece of art, and then like not think, oh, I should learn something about that artist and see some of their other work and kind of place it in in a body of work rather than in a how would you word it? Like I think I viewed things more in like era and stylistic silos, you know.
Right.
So like I knew that I liked Rockwell, but to be frank, like probably I don't know, even like 10 years ago or so, I would have, you could have shown me NC Wyeth or Pyle and Rockwell, and I mean, I think I would have been able to differentiate Rockwell, but like, I would have seen it as like, it's all in this kind of era and tradition,
Hmm.
and I've just been terrible with like, oh, like that's a person, and they, and they worked for this company,
You know what though? I don't think you're alone in that. I do know that I actually can think of quite a few artists that are like that, where if they see it, like they're like, oh, I know that art. I like that art. And they could be like you, where they just kind of lump it into like eras and all that. I do think I don't think like all artists will kind of like geek out over. I mean, that's kind of the wrong choice of words. I think. I don't know. I don't think like all artists necessarily like keep tabs on who's who and that kind of thing. You
sure,
know.
yeah. But once you actually pay attention and you go, oh, okay, that guy wrote a book, so I could actually
Oh
learn
yeah.
about their style. I mean, like that just it's so ridiculous that never really occurred to me. They're like, oh, I could look up what they had to say about their own work and their own process. It, I know that sounds crazy, but like I just had not really thought that way. Um, I just thought, oh,
I
they made work, you know.
well, so I'm curious. Like, did you learn how to paint pretty much like within your schooling and all that? Like,
Um,
because I wonder if it came. I wonder if it's like a matter of like for me, I had to hunt down this information because I was out of school by the time I was trying to figure out how to paint and all that. So I was like, I don't know where the resources are. I need to like kind of
yeah.
look around and look at people and see what I like and what I don't like. And if I do like it, I need to reverse engineer it and figure out how it works.
Well, so no, actually, I didn't. I'm reluctant to say that I didn't learn any painting at school, but the more I think about it, so I had done as far as schooling goes, I didn't do any schooling until I had already been working.
Okay.
And what I did, I took the beginning illustration courses at Academy of Art University, but I did their online program. And so I learned a bit, but at that point, I don't think I ever touched color in
Oh wow.
in those classes. Like I did like their foundation stuff, and then so I was working at this factory, and they would pay for classes wherever I wanted to go, which was super cool perk of that factory. Um, and so I was taking these online classes, and then the factory closed. I got laid off, and so I finished that degree, just an associate's, with a community college, and the okay. So actually, I could say there was some painting, like oil painting, color stuff that I did there. I did one class that was oil painting, and that was actually, funnily enough, I had already done these credits through the online stuff, and then I had kind of like split the degree. I was like, oh, I want to do art, but I also want to learn about business because I'm already like freelancing. So like the art stuff I can kind of figure out, but business, it would be nice to have someone hold my hand a little bit with.
Yeah, that's so real quick. That is actually like so the art stuff I can always like figure it out myself and like reverse engineer it and all that kind of thing. But I've tried doing the same thing for business, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm that dog at the keyboard where I'm just like I don't know where to look for this kind of thing or even find the resources for it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a whole other discipline, and this is like a bit of a rabbit
that's
trail, but it is like
I was gonna say that was very smart of you to have that prescient uh, or that have that foresight to be like I should look into taking business classes because I think a lot of artists don't think that way.
I wish I had taken more, to be honest. Because now that I'm doing Fantastic Tanks, it's like it's different than freelancing.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
it's your own IP and everything.
is I mean that's a legitimate business, obviously, and you need to be thinking about that if that's what you want to do. But it's simple. It's like you negotiate a
Your
yeah,
rates,
your rate. It's
yeah, and the
like
contract.
I'm providing you this for this compensation in this timeline, and then you do it,
Mm,
right? And you can log time or whatever if you want, and send invoices or whatever. But that's pretty straightforward. When you're when you when you're doing your own IP, then it's like you are the entire business. It's like you're not just
yeah.
making the artwork, you're deciding what the end product is and where you're going to sell it and how you're going to market it. And, you got to learn about your suppliers, and it's it's a lot. Um, it's awesome. I love it, but it's like, it's a huge undertaking.
It's yeah, it's way more than freelancing ever is.
Well, so to back up a little bit and answer your question, you were asking about how I learned to paint. So yeah, I did have one class there that was a legitimate, like just painting class, and I was saying it was funny. And the funny thing about that is that it was the very last class that I had to take in order to graduate, and I had I don't know why I put it off. I think I just the way the schedule worked or something. But anyway, it was I just had this one class, and then I would have my degree, and I already had one child at the time, and kind of just wanted to get on with life. Like I didn't want to be in school. I didn't want to be in school to begin with. Um, but I once you have once you've been in the workforce, and I mean I think this would resonate with you with your experience, that once you've been in the workforce and then you want something, and school can help you get closer to that, then it's like, well, then you have a why and you have a target, and that's a whole different feeling than like coming out of high school and just doing it because that's what you're expected to do.
Oh yeah.
Well, so anyway, this is the last class, and it was I was going to do it in like a May term, so it would be like a month and a half or whatever.
Hmm.
And I was the only one who signed up for the class, so they
Oh
canceled
wow.
it.
So you kind of had like a mentor sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, so they canceled it, but then I reached out to the instructor. I was like, "Look, this is the only class I have left to graduate. I'd really appreciate it if you could do it." And it turned out that like we were both driving 20 minutes to get to the school, but we lived in the same town. So
Oh
he
really?
was like, "Why don't you just paint your stuff and then bring it to my studio every like 2 weeks or whatever it was, and we would do a critique." So it did end up being like a mentorship rather than a painting class. Um, and it
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was cool, and it was also structured in such a way that because it was just me, and because it was like over the summer, it's like, do we really have to like meet and you just sit there and watch me paint? Like he was like, just
Hmm.
here are the assignments, paint and then bring them in, and so it was much more tailored. It fit much more closely to um, how I work and how I wanted it to go anyway. Where it's like a much more. Um, I'm reluctant to say that I'm self-directed because I can be lazy. But if I'm self-directed with you must show up and talk about your work, with some accountability, then then that's how I prefer to work. And so that was great. But other than that, I think the bulk of my painting experience, I had gotten. I started by modding games,
Oh
and
really?
yeah, like my brother and I, we modded uh, Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. That was our
Hey,
favorite one.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
love that game.
yeah, it's a. I have a lot of fond memories. So we yeah, we would mod that game, and it just kind of worked out that like I was just more interested in the art and the textures, and I really got into texturing these levels. So I would make uh, really all the assets like because it was modding. It was like all the frameworks already there. You're just swapping things out,
Yeah.
and so I think that
And,
was like a really great way to learn. Um,
oh, totally. That's a really good way to at least to get like some working knowledge of like how things are put together and stuff for a product.
yeah,
And like like with texturing, they say like, don't ever at least like nowadays, they say don't ever use pure black and pure white because it kind of is outside of like the range of what you'll actually see. Like it won't look right within a render.
hmm which
Yeah,
is
no, I
which
can
is
see
like
that.
which is a painting principle. Yeah,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
one that I break on the regular.
Oh gosh, I black is like I want to say that's like my third color in my palette.
Yeah.
It's in there all the time.
Yeah, so I think I learned primarily from um, well, I shouldn't say primarily. It started with texturing, and so that just kind of had this natural transition into like, well, if I like getting the materials right, then why not, you know, do it in perspective, do a scene. Um, I would kind of just turn my brain off and go into render mode, which is a lot of fun. Where you're just like, it's the lamest scene ever. It's a cube, whatever, but I'm detailing the concrete texture on the side of this, and so that was kind of, I think, what made it easier to like devote a lot of time, because you can just noodle away forever with texture and stuff. And
you could spend hours on a thing if you're not careful.
yeah, well, I mean, I would too. and then so I got this internship at a little indie game company called Garage Games, and I just thought like I'll be doing textures, and I went out there and just kind of like what you were saying with work. It's like there's this value or like the problem that you're solving, and they didn't have a texture problem, right? Like so, they wanted me to do some other types of work that would require me to learn to draw, and the art director there, he was very influential in my work. It wasn't, it was such a short time that it's impossible to say like, it's impossible to say like, I grew and I developed and my work is, from that, but like looking back on the principles that he taught me and that those principles are not necessarily universals, right? It's like kind of loose, gestural, brushy type work. There was another intern who was with me who did very technical, really fine line drawing, and he gave him different advice, and we went down different paths, and it's just interesting looking back on that, that like that was actually really influential in what I did and what I sought out. There was a lot of stuff online. I think I was in just like to me, I'll say is the perfect perfect time and place as far as well, one, I have to give the caveat that I think we all kind of look back at the way we were raised or the generation that we were in, and there's something that was perfect and there was something that was like the worst. We had to walk uphill both ways and that sort of thing. But I'm very fortunate and very happy that I grew up at a time where there were good communities and good content on the internet for art learning, but not so much that I was drowning and trying to figure out what was good and what was bad, and not so much that it was never advertised to me. To my recollection, there was never like, I'm just like drowning in ads now, Facebook and YouTube and whatever. And back then it was
Constant.
like I had to seek someone out and go, oh, this Goro guy, this guy's really good. What does he have to say? And Feng Zhu, he hadn't even done a school at that point. I was like, who's this guy? This is interesting.
I distinctly remember. I want to say like, so I was part of in high school. I was part of this, in like early college. I was part of this forum called Drawing Board, which, God, like forums. Those don't exist anymore, really. It was great though. It was like a very chill. It was funny enough. It was like a place where a lot of professionals posted, and it's just like no frills.
Yeah.
They're just like kind of like just talking and sharing their stuff, whatever. Bruce Timm, who was the creator of Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series and Justice League, he was on there. And he would just show up occasionally here and there because I want to say like one of the other members cajoled him into getting on there. something like that. And it was unreal to me because I'm just on here. I'm like, oh, here, look at here's my stuff in my sketchbook forum thread.
Right.
And then like later college was conceptart.org,
Yep.
which now that's dead.
Yep.
Yeah, like, same kind of thing as you, where it's like, it, there's so many resources nowadays, which that's kind of a boon because, like I had to hunt down like a lot of Frank Riley stuff, and now it's like fairly easy to find things about him. I know that like if you were to just type in that name on YouTube, you're gonna get a bunch of artists
Mhm.
channels that are that have their take on it one way or the other. And if you go to like Proko's channel, he since he came up in the Jeff Watts school,
Yeah.
he has that training as well, and he talks about the Frank Riley method. And then there's Jeff Watts who spearheads it, and pretty much like he's the main guy to talk to about that. But there's other people as well. But yeah, like no, I remember like back in concept art, it was that kind of thing where you would just see the names and be like, who is this person? And then you'd either Google, or was Google even a thing back then?
Yeah. I don't think so.
You would ask Jeeves.
Who is Sparth? Like, oh, holy
Yeah,
cow.
who is Farth? Who is this Mike Butkiss that I'm seeing? Or who is this Ron Lemon? And then yeah, you'd see images and be like, who are these people? These are amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just slowly kind of learn about it that way. Yeah, yeah, no, I'm kind of with you on that, where I think if I were to come up, it's like a double-edged sword. Like back then, it was harder to find a lot of those resources, but you could still kind of find them if you looked around.
Hmm.
Some things that might be easier to access nowadays would have taken longer back then, but nowadays you also have to put up with ads and the inundation of just social media in general, where I think like if I was 16 years old and Instagram was around, I probably would have melted into a pile.
Yeah.
It like it,
Yeah. There's.
you know,
Well, that's a whole other conversation, but I think it is interesting that we have. You were talking about these communities where it's like chill. Like it would just it'd be professional work and some of your heroes even, but like they didn't care. It wasn't
yeah,
like
there was no heirs.
yeah, and I do feel for kids now, and this is um, much broader than just art, but like you just can't. Uh, I don't know. Maybe I don't understand because I didn't grow up in the generation that was like had the internet from the get go. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
but it
We were like the half in, half out crowd.
but it just seems like you can't. Um, it's not like I don't know. I want to say you can't make a mistake, but it's like you you have to put this like version of yourself forward, and there's also kind of this flow, this kind of social stream, and
Yeah.
you've got to decide whether you're floating downstream or fighting it. you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and it is kind of. Actually, I do wonder. Like, I'm kind of curious to see how like my niece and nephew and like my daughter are gonna kind of adopt this, because they're gonna grow up into a world where the internet is an incredibly healthy and robust system, and maybe because of that they're gonna be have an easier time to navigate it because that's all they know, versus people like us, or even like the generation that's a little bit younger, where they're kind of the pioneers for a lot of this thing, where they're learning that they have to have like a they kind of have to be like on brand, so to speak.
Hmm.
Which means like, you offer the sanitized version of yourself and all that.
Hmm.
And that's hard. But I do wonder like will the younger generations kind of learn how to be able to just naturally digest that and be like, "Oh yeah, this is no problem at all."
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think human nature will not change. It's just like the platforms on which it is
yeah.
manifested. So I mean, that's kind of funny. It's like you were talking about the brand thing. And I was thinking, yeah, it's such a shame that like a person has to be a brand. Like you have to brand yourself as a person. But then I'm like, yeah, but that was just called being cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the high
Or,
school
or,
like.
or your work self and then your home self kind of thing.
Mm,
Like the person that people at work know and then the person that people at home know. Let's
oh,
see.
let's see with this guy.
So that's cool though. So what one thing I found really fascinating about your background is you had an art director that basically took you in and was totally willing to like train you up
Mm,
and kind of show you how to do certain things and also take a risk on you failing
mm.
as you kind of learn. And I feel like that's so unheard of nowadays for companies to take that kind of chance. Not even in just art, just in general, where like um, I have older relatives that kind of like my dad, for example, started out as a cashier at a 7-Eleven and like mopped floors and all that. And then
Hmm.
he eventually became like a general or a regional manager of Cumberland Farms, which is a convenience store that's up and down the East Coast.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, nowadays, can you imagine? No one does that kind of thing where they advance up the ladder of any kind of career like that, where you can start off from like a really base thing and then be able to climb up into a larger thing. Or even something where someone says they don't have the right skills, but they have the potential. We should take them on and we should just show them. Um,
I think it does
you
happen.
actually,
I think it's a different.
oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. I just think it depends on what industry you're in, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying it's totally industry dependent, but if you're, well, I'm reluctant to. I don't want to say things about specific studios or places that I don't know, but I think I think that it depends on who's in the seat making the decision. I mean, I think you're absolutely right as far as um, Joe, the art director that I had at Garage Games. He knew he wasn't going to get anything out of me. Like everything that he was teaching me, and I should say teaching with an asterisk. It's like he gave me the principles, and we had conversations over coffee and lunch and that sort of thing. It wasn't like I got tutorials or anything. Um,
No, yeah,
but
yeah. It's they show you enough and then kind of expect you to fill in the blanks.
yeah, but I have to say though, like he knew that was like this is like a this concept that I'm telling you is like a you're not going to master this in 10 years. Like
Yeah.
you might be proficient enough in it to get the job done in like a year or 2 years from now, but I've only got you for 6 months or whatever it was. So like it I think that that's kind of what you were talking about with like you know artists at Lexicon having this nice being cool and having this good culture. Like I think it's that same kind of thing. It's like
Hmm.
um, you're not if you're trying to be careful about the way I say this because I don't want it to be like people who don't give you advice are bad. It's like no one has to give you advice, and yeah, but I think that when there's a younger artist and there's someone has whether they really seem like they have the potential or not, it doesn't really matter. It's like they're earlier on in the journey, and why not? Like, why not just
Oh yeah.
take a minute and I mean, I think there's a pride part of us that wants to do that. That wants to be like, well, here, listen to my story, kind of thing. But I think that I think that, I want to be careful with this because I don't want to downplay. I don't want to downplay anything by saying that it's a great thing. Why not? We should all be doing it. I think that we should. I also think we don't have to, and I'm also incredibly grateful that somebody did that for me.
Yeah. I guess it's. I'll see if I can give you an assist on this. Like, like in a space like a LuxCon, it's even if it is like someone that's green behind the wet behind the ears or green, whatever you want to call it, and talking to like a more experienced person and that experienced person giving advice, I would say you could still kind of consider yourself peers to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you might both be in vastly different areas in your career path, but you're more or less kind of trying to do the same thing. Whereas, like, the idea of an art director basically going out on the limb to be like, this person doesn't have a proven track record, but I see something in them. We should see how this plays out.
Mm-hmm.
And like and it becomes a risk for them because it could go sideways, and if it does, then it means you're out of time and like wasted labor and that kind of thing. But it also could be the other way where you got to be on the ground floor of someone and give them a great opportunity to work on things that they maybe didn't get a chance to. And even within that environment where, like you said, like you're learning concepts that you're not going to learn within like a decade even. It's going to be like a lifetime learning thing, and they only have like you for 6 months or so. That's still it's still some amazing work experience because it forces someone to kind of learn on their feet and figure it out. I think like the closest example I could think of was when I first started working as an apparel artist. They asked me like if I knew Illustrator, and I knew Illustrator for like lettering comics, which meant like I knew maybe 1/100th of what Illustrator could do.
Yeah.
And I just said, "Oh yeah, sure, I know Illustrator." And then like I went home, and then that weekend I was at that point, thankfully YouTube was a thing, so I started looking at like YouTube videos and all that, and just like looking at different web resources to try and figure out some of the other things in Illustrator because I knew it could do a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I just never really dabbled with it. But even then, like I still came in with at least some level of expectation where they were like, okay, we don't have to teach this person the principles of design or whatever. He just needs to learn the software.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that that's somewhat common because software, like learning tools, is relatively easy to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of this anecdote from Crash McCreary, who's a concept artist.
Mm-hmm.
And if the name's not familiar, If you ever saw his work, his concept work for Jurassic Park or anything like that, you'd be like, "Oh, that guy,"
Yeah,
because he.
he is one that I recognize.
Okay, yeah. So like Crash McCreary, he has a funny anecdote where like I guess like the way he got into art, like he started off like in a rock band,
Hmm.
and uh, it wasn't really going anywhere. So he was like, I'm gonna go back to school. He enrolled in like in the Art Institute over in Pasadena,
Hmm.
or Art Center. What I think Art Center is what it's called, right? Over in Pasadena. Um,
I think so. Yeah.
he did like a few years there and got together like a portfolio and was just showing it around. And Stan Winston saw it, and this is like the Crash McCurry had not had an art job until then. And Stan Winston said, "Hey, like, do you want to come and work for us as a concept artist?" And he said, "Sure." And what's funny enough is that it's an offer that like that position didn't exist at his company
Hmm.
at all. They only had people in the office that knew how to do things physically, like model makers and animatronic people and
Yeah.
makeup artists and that kind of thing, right? No one in that office was a concept artist, or anyone that had their sole job be just a concept artist.
Hmm.
But Stan Winston had he had enough of a foresight to be like, he's got pretty good stuff. I'm pretty sure I can teach him the other things that we do so he can help out around with us and all that.
Hmm.
But I think it would probably be good for us to have someone like this on our staff
Hmm.
just to at least figure out things and have that kind of talent on board instead of having to like look elsewhere for that kind of thing. And it paid off for them in like tenfold. Yeah, like when I think about it, like I think it's hard. I can't think of a more recent moment where someone says, or at least like a larger company says, like, "Hey, you're kind of wet behind the ears, but we think there's potential for you to kind of grow within this company." They're kind of like, "Oh, do you have the X amount of years of experience?" Or like, "This is an entry level position. We want you to have shipped 3 AAA games."
Well, this is where I was talking about, the industry, and I do want to be careful not to say, you know,
Yeah, generalizations and all
well,
that.
yeah, but even just to say things that are that I believe to be true that maybe aren't. I
Hmm.
my understanding is limited to my experience, but there is a lot of like recruitment, like recruiting through um, these like kind of what do you call them? Just like recruitment companies, So you're not
Yeah,
even
yeah,
really,
recruitment agencies and all that, like ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn or what have you.
yeah, you're not really um, connected to the studio, or to the people that you'll be working with. There's like an extra level of uh, gatekeeping or whatever for many studios, not for all of them. And so, yeah, I think for the smaller studios, you might end up with that kind of experience where, this is somebody's
Yeah.
little passion thing that they put together, and they want the right team. Whereas the larger studios, again, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but they will use those kind of recruiting talent agencies, and there is kind of a turnover rate that's expected, and there's also, I think, a culture of hopping around from studio to studio, from job to job. It's like, and this is partly the industry, and I think partly a generational thing, where it's like
Hmm.
your promotion is your next studio position. It's like, um, if you want to raise, you look for a job in another company, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't think that the old, the days of, I worked for this company for, and they took care of us kind of thing. I don't think that's dead. I think it's rare. I think you won't really see it in the on the corporate side of things. The bigger the company, the less likely you are to see that. Um, and that's partly because they just have to deal with a larger group of people, and so you end up with, well, this is more of a philosophical thing with, what is fair? Is fair everyone gets the exact same thing, or is fair like everyone has a conversation about what their values are and what they would like, and gets a custom tailored thing? You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that really at a large company. Um, I mean, you can if you have the resources to spend on it, but um, that's more likely to happen in a small setting, where you can talk with someone about what your goals are, and what you prefer in terms of compensation and that sort of thing. But all that stuff, kind of the bigger you get, the more standardized it gets. You know.
Yeah, everything kind of goes towards the center, so to speak. It's like all the highs and lows kind of get evened out as things get larger because you kind of, I guess, yeah, because you're trying to manage so many people there, you really don't have a choice. You kind of have to go towards the center on a lot of things just to be able to compromise and make sure that everyone is kind of happy, or maybe not happy, but maybe content to some regard.
Yeah, and that it works with the organization's goals and
Yeah.
budgets and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it just isn't. It's just not the same. It's not the same thing. Um, but there are small studios, and I would say also, like when I started, it wasn't. It was like super uncool to be indie. You were like uh, made fun of. You're never gonna make it. All that kind of stuff. Now it's
Oh
like,
yeah. Nowadays, everyone's looking to be indie. It seems.
yeah, and I find that really interesting, actually. That like the path that I have taken has led me to a lot more indie type work, a lot more personal work that it's just passion projects and that sort of thing. Um, and it's smaller, and there's fewer like glorious titles or whatever. Like I worked on such and such. Um, but like it's funny because you'll run into those people that have worked on things um, that were the big projects in my mind, and they'd rather be doing their own thing. They'd
Hmm.
they'd rather be working small and having more say in the final product, and um, or just like enjoying the process because it's something that they care about. Rather than like, okay, yeah, we've done these titles how many times now, and at some point, like you were saying with the with comic books, it's like when you were talking about that, I was thinking, yeah, there's kind of a couple options there, right? It's like either you find something new, or you decide that, um, you know what, I don't care as much as other people do, and I'm still gonna like just show up and do it because
Yeah.
you know, and not to be resigned to like, well, this is my fate or whatever, but like, um, I would say that generally for like professional work, most professional work that I've done, um, I I try not to fall in love with it, you know. But that's maybe that's a
I I think I'm the same way. At least I know I am that with apparel art. I think part of that is um, because of the needs of apparel art. And funny enough, this actually ties back to when you asking me about how I'm jumping around and all that in terms of looks and everything. Uh, you have to you for apparel art, it doesn't behoove you to have one style. You need to kind of be able to jump around on whatever project that's needed,
Mhm.
um, and kind of get it done however that's needed too. So
Mhm.
I've had to like you'll never see it from me from personal artwork, but I've done the range from graphic design layout to photo bashing things together to make it work, um, to doing like cute kid illustrations because they're for like youth tees and all that.
Mhm.
Like right now, we're working with a client to do some designs for a Halloween, their Halloween line of apparel
Mhm.
that they want to launch around that. I want to say like probably I think October of later this year, I believe. But yeah, that's been all over the gamut where it's been type-based stuff and doing some really cute illustration stuff, and then also doing stuff that's kind of in between where it's very graphic and yeah, and like when I think about it, it's like wow, like a really good example is like wow, like within the like past 3 weeks, I've done somewhere in the realm of like 50 illustrations,
Mm.
and I can't use a single one of those in my portfolio.
Right.
Just none of them are applicable to what I'm trying to what I want to try and get out of freelance.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I haven't really honestly thought about. I should say I haven't thought about my portfolio. Um, I have, but in the past, up until the past few months, my portfolio has just been like, and I don't even know. Like, I I'm just gonna post stuff that I make, and then remove things that I just don't like as much anymore. You know.
Mm.
But as far as yeah, trying to, well, I guess I'm kind of saying the same thing. It's like um, a lot of the work that I've done, even a lot of the personal stuff, even though I'm like enjoying it, and it's like this is my style or whatever. It's still like it's so exploratory that it's just not like it doesn't feel like this is the thing that I'm going to put out there. Is like this is who I am as an artist or something, you know. And maybe that's coming back to the
Yeah.
thing we were talking about with social media being so kind of brand heavy, you know.
Yeah, there is that. Like, there's an expectation of you showing the same thing over and over again. That's funny enough. That's kind of like what gallery artists run into a lot, from what I understand, where they will make a thing, and boy, you better hope that that is something that you like to do because there's a chance it'll take off, and that's the only thing galleries want from you
Mm.
from then forth. And it might have been something that you just did on a fluke where you're like, I was tired trying to paint this other thing. I just needed to paint this to blow off steam, and it took off like crazy, and now you're stuck painting that forever.
Right. I wonder though, like, is that a good problem to have? You know, like, oh man,
I,
people
I,
love my work, and I have to do that. I have to make it now. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I
Well,
get
I
it.
guess it's yeah, yeah. It's a, double-edged sword kind of thing where on one hand, really good that people want that kind of thing, but
Then you're pigeonholed.
yeah, you're pigeonholed, and if it's not something you were really all about to begin with, that it'll eventually, I think, show through in the work.
Yeah.
Um, no matter how much you might divorce yourself from it, it'll eventually catch up to you. At least that's like for professional work. I try and do that where I may not have. This is going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth on this. I feel like I don't have a personal stake in the work, but I do try and make things that I think look cool or that I think are funny or
Mm.
that that I think would be
That
enjoyable to see.
appeal to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Even if it's something like an example was like two examples I can think of is I did some Western illustrations a few weeks back for a client, and funny enough, I did not realize that I would be as about that because like traditional Western art that I usually see in galleries and stuff, I'm kind of like, your me in situ or your Morgan Westling kind of thing, where it's like I can recognize the prowess of the technique in those paintings and everything, and like the compositions are all the technical stuff about it, I'm like, yeah, this is really good stuff. And I don't care one lick in regards to the subject matter. But
Mm-hmm.
when I had to do it like a week ago or whatever, I was like, I'm actually really enjoying this. This is kind of fun. It's more outside of my wheelhouse than I thought, and I'm putting my own spin on it because they wanted like dark Western stuff, like not just your traditional
Hmm.
rodeo cowboy kind of thing. They like one of the things they wanted was like a skeleton gunslinger kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's like, yeah,
Who was that dude who was doing that? Did these comics?
Kev Ferreira.
You know,
I think is that who you're thinking of?
was this like 15 years ago?
And they were like through Dark Horse, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember I was gonna go to that school. It was art. Was it Art Center, Pasadena? And he was giving a talk in New York City about it,
Mm.
and I went out and watched it, and listened to what he had to say and looked at his work. I thought it was really cool, but I did kind of feel like, yeah, maybe I could just figure this out on my own. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. That made me think of that his work.
Oh yeah, like and what's funny is I had the same thought like while I was doing it. I was like, this is actually a lot like that one guy's work that I remember seeing that on conceptart.org way back when
Yeah.
and thinking it was really cool. Um, I want to say nowadays, like I see him frequent some Facebook groups that I'm part of that are like art appreciation groups, like Today's Inspiration or there's like one for Howard Pyle, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, and I see his name pop up here and there. I'm like, yeah, I remember you from way back when. We never talked, but it's good to see that you're still around.
Right. Yeah. I remember just giving him a hard time about um, Ryan Church, I think, because Ryan Church had gone to, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, and he he made a good point. And it's funny because I think back to like my 19-year-old self, and like, well, what about, um, but he was saying that there's kind of a, some schools have a house style, but then there's also kind of this like leader of the pack mentality. It's like, and
Mhm.
Ryan was doing kind of cool, fresh stuff, and so that's what everyone else in the class did, because uh, there was something attractive. It had an attractive quality to it, so that it you wanted to
Yeah.
emulate it. Anyway, that's a whole But I remember giving him a hard time about that. Like, well, if I'm just going to go to school and like just end up doing whatever the best person in the class does, whatever. You look back and you're like, man, I would have.
I think that's all of us.
What I would have said to myself. You know what I mean? Like, anyway.
I definitely know, like, if I had to look back at myself and be like, what are you doing? What's happening here?
Anyway, I'm sorry I cut you off. You were talking about doing these
Oh,
westerns and starting to enjoy the
yeah,
theme.
anyway, so, no, but yeah, so, like, I did these Western things, but then, like, this past week I've been doing these, like, Halloween stuff, and, like, uh, none of it is anything I would wear, but I did design a shirt that I think like my daughter would really enjoy when she's like 3 or 4.
Hmm.
Like it's really cute, has a lot of appeal, and like when I was designing it, you know personally I have no attachment to it, so like if they were to come back and be like, hey, we needed to change this and this and this around, I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't really care. Um, but I am like proud of the fact that
The
it's
result.
something that, yeah, it's something that like I would want someone else to wear to
Yeah,
because I think it would look neat.
yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
I forget where my actual point was with all this.
Yeah, but that's I mean that's a cool thing. That's a cool step too. I mean that's what I felt uh, with the children's book series that I did. You know, I didn't author them. I was hired on to do that. But like, you know, my own kids were not quite old enough to read them. You know, but I'm like, man, in a couple of years, you know, I would like to have my kids, you know, read these, you know, children's books that I've illustrated. You know, that would be something really cool about that. You know, and
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's the well, maybe this is another term, but like the idea of generative work, like work that inspires, work that um, has a creation, work that has a ripple effect of creation, if that makes sense. It's not just you making something um, because you want to make something and that would be cool, but it's like the effect that will have to some audience will be that uh, you know it will create something in them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Maybe that's a whole other thing. I don't know how that really applies to the um,
Well,
exactly to that, but
I'm curious. Like, can you think of like, because I want to say like artists kind of have to go through this trial by fire where you learn to let go of professional work
mhm.
to be able to kind of like realize like it's not there's some battles not worth dying on the hill for,
Yeah.
and if the client wants to change, you just kind of nod your head and go, "Yep, you're the one paying the bills, so why not?"
Mhm.
Um, can you think of like I know when that was for me, but can you think of when that was for you? Like what job or something that you ran across that kind of taught you that lesson?
Yeah, where I learned that, huh? Yeah, I mean, the first um, bigger contract that I worked on was for this online. Uh, what would you call it? A massive multiplayer real-time strategy. It was a Facebook game,
Gotcha.
medieval themed. Um,
Oh, like the ones that look really cool in in the trailers and all that, and then you see the screenshots and you're like, wait, that's it?
Thanks. No, I think we actually made a pretty cool project. It did have its issues, but no, we never did. Our marketing budget was pretty low. It was an indie studio. These guys, and I gotta say, like to that point of like what does the client want, and they're footing the bill. These guys had this idea, and they were not game developers. I mean, they were software developers, but they wanted to make this game, and I mean, they really had skin in the game, as far as like, the debts that they owed and the strain on the I shouldn't say strain on relationships necessarily, but like it was consequential. It's like this means how my family eats and what kind of shoes they get to wear, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think it was much. I wouldn't say that they were personal about it. I definitely am not saying that, but I recognized the degree to which the decisions mattered, the weight of those decisions, and I came to really love that game and the IP, and they liked my artwork that I did for them, and gave me a lot of freedom to make decisions on the art style. Not early on, but we built that trust. And so anyway, all that to say,
That's fantastic, though, to be able to build up that trust over time with them.
but it also got you into that category of what you're talking about, where it's like, then you have these kind of invested conversations about like, this is what I think it ought to be, you know. So it was a relationship where I wasn't necessarily like, just do this exactly as we say. I mean, if it came to that, then that's what it came to, you know. But that was not the way that it worked. But there were a lot of decisions, you know, on the game that like, there's just so much more. There's so much more going on in the background, you know, in terms of marketing and you know, how much revenue is this expected to bring in, and you know, for the artist, for me, I mean, even considering the features of the game, you know, not even necessarily the art style, but you know, I wanted this certain look and feel and experience, you know, and then when you'd end up with, I'm just trying to think of a specific example, but there were certain features that we would be pushing for, like, I really think our players would love this, and then we wouldn't do it. You know, we'd have meetings about it. We'd talk about, you know, what would that take to implement. And so there were times where I would get like really frustrated, feeling like this is going to, you know, make or break the whole thing, and we've made the wrong decision or whatever, you know. But you know, like I said, there's that bigger picture, and you realize like, okay, well, that's what I thought, but like I didn't really have any skin in the game. You know, I would get paid for the work that I did, not for the gamble that I took that this is what will work. You know, and so I learned to respect that for sure on that project. I think it was definitely a thing before with. Even just like at the internship that I took, but I definitely there was still just like a young idealist, and I remember this conversation with that art director that I was talking about, where he was just like, I mean, very frank with me. Like, let's see, how old are you? Like, okay, yeah, so that's that age where you're like everything has to matter. Like, thanks, you know. Yeah.
I get that. So okay, so for you, you had it pretty much as the Wow, my brain just like completely spaced for a moment. You pretty much had it as the do I want to die on this hill or not to with this decision kind of thing. For myself, I had the case of a art director that, well, actually not the art director. My art director has actually been really good with direction and all that. It was a client that didn't know what. Hey, Alan, good to see you. I just saw that Alan,
Oh
my
yeah.
friend Alan,
Let me
popped
hop
into
on
chat.
now.
No, but anyway, so for me, it was a case of a client that didn't know what they wanted, but they also couldn't express what they wanted. Or
Mm.
sorry, I'm messing that quite up. Um,
Express what they
they
did.
knew what they knew what they didn't want,
Yeah.
but yeah, they could not tell us what they wanted. They just knew every time they saw it what they didn't want.
Gotcha.
And I went through. It was a illustration job, and I went through. I want to say, God, 8 or 9 different revisions to this. And the thing about like apparel art is it's not like how illustration work happens where there's things like kill fees and um, or even something where you submit a sketch and then things get approved. I tried to do things like that early on,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't help things at all. Like when I first started working in the apparel industry and I saw that how things were done, young me, I was thinking like,
Oh,
I can do better.
there's a better way. Yeah. Yeah.
I still think there is a part of it that should be better. It's also something that I have no power at all to be able to change it. Like an example being that the apparel industry is largely run on spec work. Um, and that's just something that's apparently endemic to that industry, and there's no way for me to have any power over changing that.
Mm.
Um, Me trying to stop the tide of the ocean, it seems like.
Right.
But I did at least think like maybe if I institute like some of the practices I learned from illustration, I can try and get some things to make sense here.
Mm.
And that piece in particular, I remember giving them like a rough sketch, of a final sketch, a color rough to just kind of make sure that like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Are you okay with it? And all the way through, everything's approved, and then I give them the final, and it's like, oh no, we don't like it like this. Change it.
Mm.
Okay, changed it for them. No, actually, we don't like this thing about it. Can you change this? Okay, change it. No, actually, we
Yeah.
don't care for. Yeah, and it just
They
kept
actually just
going.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was one of those things like by the time my boss came to me and he just said like, okay, don't be upset. And I said there is zero chance for me to be upset at this point because I just want the thing off my plate or for them to make a decision.
Yeah.
But he was coming to tell me that like they were taking me off the project and giving it to another artist in the bold pen, and I was like, that's fine because at this point they're running me around in circles and I don't know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if they saw someone else tackle it, that'll kind of settle it for them. And yeah, and it was one of those things. It was only after they saw. It's so crazy because like it was only after they saw what the other artist did, and mind you, the other artist used about 50% of my illustration for his final. He used a bunch of assets that were part of my illustration and all that
Mm-hmm.
to make his, which is totally fine. But only after that they were like, "Yeah, we didn't like the other one because it was too spooky." Because it was supposed to be funny enough, it's supposed to be a Halloween piece, not for this current client. It was for another client. Um, it was like a seasonal tea for them.
Okay.
And they gave it to me because they were like, "Oh, Andrew did the Halloween tea 2 years ago, and they really liked it. And that was like one of the fastest approvals we ever got. So let's give it to him again. Plus, he kind of likes this kind of thing." And this time around, they were like, "Nope, too spooky." Well, but this was like something after the fact. They kind of realized it and said it out loud and was
Gotcha.
able to form
Yeah.
an opinion. But yeah, like after that, I pretty much went in. After that, I kind of realized with the mindset, like, yeah, with a lot of this client stuff, um, unless I really think they're about to shoot themselves in the foot, and I think they're going to make a really bad decision that's just going to make me have more work. If they kind of ask for revisions, no matter what it is, I'm just kind of like, yeah, sure, that's fine, boss. Well,
Yeah.
when do you need it by?
Yeah. I mean, I do think at the end of the day, um, it's it's whatever the demand or whatever the need is, right? So like, I think that for most artists, there's this need to have creative input, to have like made decisions that made this thing cool. I think there's a need for like excellence and challenge. Like I think we want that, and those are not the client's needs most of the time. You know, the client's needs are
Yeah.
like we were saying, like familiar art style that will sell. In a timely manner. Like those are the kind of things that they're worried about. Well, I shouldn't say necessarily worried, but like with the spooky thing, for example, like they're concerned about how it will be received by their audience, right? And so I'm not
Yeah.
saying this to you, like this. I'm just for the sake
No,
of
no, yeah, just like kind of thinking out loud.
yeah, it's like the need that is being met, and that is the reason you're being paid, are not the same needs that you have. You know, and I know that sounds weird to say like you have needs in your artwork or whatever, but like that is the desire, right? To like I want to make something fresh and interesting, and you know,
Yeah.
is it,
Kind of thinking about it. So like that axiom of like that we tell clients where it's like you can have two of these things out of three, but you can't have all three, and it's either you can have it cheap, you can have it on time, or you can have it good, right? And you can kind of pick two of those three things. But you can't have all three. Like, there's probably an inverse for that for artists specifically, where
yeah,
to
yeah,
determine like the appeal of work. I don't quite know what the three tenets would be. Um, so if someone can has an idea for it, I'm all ears because like I'm kind of like thinking out loud on it.
yeah.
I would say, okay, like a rough thing. I would say like, is it a safe style? Is the subject matter recognizable? What would the third thing be?
This is
Does this
for
have,
whether or not you value your work, or
yeah, or something kind of like that. Like, I guess I'm thinking about it from a client thing where, okay, like, if you're doing your personal work, it really only matters to you, and that kind of means that you can do whatever you want with it.
I think we all want people
If you,
to love it, right? Like that's
yeah,
that's a main one, and that is not a guarantee. you know,
oh yeah, no.
Especially if you're
So,
risk
so,
taking and stuff. So that
so I guess what I'm thinking, like, okay, like in an ideal world, you kind of just explore whatever rabbit trails you want in terms of how your personal work looks, and whatever comes out, right? But in the real world, if you want your work to be seen and to be liked and to have some level of appeal, it'll need to meet like, and this is where I'm kind of thinking like this is like the artist's version of the client triangle, where you know subject matter, um, style, and then this third one, and I don't know what this third one is yet. But you can set your triangle to what one of these or two of these things, and then the third one you have to kind of like give into, where you say, okay, so in that case, I'm going to pull off on this one, and I wonder what that third one would be. This is kind of, I guess, this is kind of tied to what I was talking about earlier, where you can have safe subject matter and present it in a fresh way, or you can have fresh subject matter but present it in a safe way, right?
Okay.
And never the two shall meet, where you can have something, if it's safe in both accounts, it's boring. And if it's weird in both accounts, then audience doesn't know quite how to latch onto it.
I'm thinking in that kind of like exploratory versus familiar and loved. Like, if you want someone to love your work, it's probably not gonna. You're not, probably not going to be able to have exploratory work that is truly like, I just tried something with no expectation that it would come out. I mean, you have the desire that it will come out, but that's if you could control that, then it's not exploration.
You know what? That could probably be a good thing. Where okay, so that could probably work as the third tenet for that, because then you could say like, okay, if you want to explore with if you want to experiment and also have a unique style while experimenting, that doesn't mean you can kind of go crazy with your subject matter. You kind of have to tie it to something that's recognizable, so people can be like, oh, I've never seen a knight presented that way. Or I've never seen a dragon done that way. That's kind of neat. But if you want to go something weird with the subject matter and with the style, then that means you really can't experiment too much in terms of how it looks. The style may have to be like, yeah, okay, this could kind of work. Like, yeah, if you, it's like one of those in like the video games where the triangle or like they have the like the little thing that shows you where the strengths are and how far it can actually go out because of restraints put on. Let's see, do a better one. Like something like that, where it's like, oh, if you want to really be in experimental, you can only go so far with your style and with your subject matter before you lose people.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of mass appeal, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
you could experiment on all those different things, but yeah, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose a lot of people.
Yeah, you could break the system.
Maybe
But
that's
it's like,
maybe this is the Fantastic Tanks problem, right? Like,
so I'm curious, because I've seen some of them, but I wasn't aware. Like you're making it into a miniatures game or a board game.
so that was the first impression that most people had.
Oh, okay.
That was not really the intent from the get go. From the beginning, it was just I wanted to develop this world, and most people that saw them, just that seemed to be the most natural fit, right? Like, oh, I want to play with this.
I have a question. when people saw it, did they ever make ties to the advance? I think they're called Advance War series.
I have not heard that. No.
Oh, okay, interesting. I only mentioned that because I was thinking like maybe it's because so that game it's a video game series, but it's a strategy game series. Basically like the video game version of like playing like a miniature war game
Okay.
thing, right?
Yeah.
But as a video game.
Okay.
RTS. Sorry, that's the term.
Yeah.
It's an RTS. The main draw about it is it's this intensely deep tactical system. All the graphics in it are chibi look to
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So your
Yeah.
tanks, yeah, your tanks are like that kind of like
Bulbous.
proportions and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like very like everything is squished and put tightly together and all that. So yeah, I wonder if that's where they were kind of pulling from to be like, oh, this is going to be a board game.
I think it probably was the fact that they were 3D printed to a very small scale. Like
Hmm.
I think it resembled Warhammer for some people. In terms of the.
How small of a scale were they?
So I've never really established a scale because they don't have like characters. Um,
Hmm.
they don't have human characters rather, but they are about 4 centimeters tall.
Oh wow, okay. So originally they were going to be just art pieces and then like kind of like art pieces with a shared lore, action figures more or less,
Hmm.
I guess, correct?
Yeah, that's. I think figurines, yeah, would be like the most accurate.
Okay. And now have you thought, based on the feedback, have you started to consider like maybe this board game avenue might be an interesting thing to pursue for it?
Yeah, yeah, we've actually played with some little prototypes. The thing is, to me, I want to bring something to the table. You know what I mean? I don't want to
Mhm.
just like put this tank veneer on something. Again, it comes back to that familiarity. It's got to be familiar enough that I don't
Right.
completely lose people. But like, I there, I'm not a like a war gamer, but I do like to play creative, interesting games. Um,
Mhm.
Board Game Geek kind of stuff. Um, that's a website if you're not familiar. But
This could be your in though, because I would think like if someone is really aware of those trappings within like wargaming kind of things, you either fall into the trap of becoming paralyzed by thinking like, oh, it's like this thing, 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 or you fall into the trap of just basically repeating something that you like and not deviating far enough, you know?
hmm,
And like having, yeah, for lack of a better word, like having some level of ignorance towards what is in there can actually give you a fresh perspective, I guess.
I,
If you wanted to go that route.
I hope so. Though at the same time, I think I know enough to know that game logic is complicated, or rather, it's easy to break, and people who really enjoy creative games, different kinds of games, um, they're it's really like I don't want to I don't want to say like wine tasting or whatever, but it's like there is this level to it that's like, oh yeah, this is that I like this game because there's an interesting mechanic that you know has these implications in how you play, and that's what it's about. If on that level of gaming, and that's not necessarily like high level gaming. That's just like a little deeper than euchre and Texas Hold'em. If you like to play Catan or Ticket to Ride or Railroad Tycoon or all whatever. I can't remember. They had to rename that one because there was a computer game with that name. But there's Twilight Imperium would be like one that's kind of like past the level that I would like to go in terms of it's too complex.
Yeah. Twilight Imperium is basically you need to that thing needs to be a computer game. It's too much of a board game for
So
all of its systems.
a friend of mine described Catan and Ticket to Ride as gateway games, right? They're like games that are have a little more depth, but like you could really easily get into them. It's like it's not a huge step up from Monopoly or Clue. It's a step up in terms of like the quality of the experience because there's more choice and there's interesting mechanics. But in terms of complexity and how hard it is to learn, they're accessible, and that's what I would be aiming for. Like something that's interesting but accessible. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm recognizing that there's a whole discipline to devoted to making games with good mechanics, and so maybe I just need to hire somebody. you know.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I have a friend that did created a board game. God, I forget how many years ago that was, 3 or 5, something like that.
Mhm.
But it was the kind of thing where he's not a professional board gamer he's like a VisFX artist by trade, or sorry, not a VisFX artist, an editor by trade.
Mhm.
But yeah, he just wanted to make a board game just because that was something he always wanted to do. But I remember him describing it to me, like what they went through for it, and it was a case of he had rough ideas for how the game should play, and the way he more or less arrived at the final thing was he iterated on it. So, created a rough idea, and then he had people like play test it, and he saw where everything was kind of falling apart,
Mhm.
and he fixed that, and then redid it, and then he would get a different set of people to play it, like a different set of friends to play it, and see what it was like. And I think he did that like I think he did that like 3 or 4 times before he started taking it to conventions to see how total strangers would take it
Mhm.
and approach it. Um, so I guess like that is one way to go about it instead of like having to hire someone to figure it out. It's just a matter of iteration to kind of see what works, what doesn't, and slowly kind of shape it to make it, I guess, still interesting, but to also take like frustration out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely agree
Um,
with that.
yeah.
Making it
Eh, eh,
a pleasure to play. It's
yeah.
it's kind of interesting how that works. That like, uh, sorry if I cut you off there.
Oh, no, go on.
Um, that sometimes the fun games are absurd. I mean, I mean, not just absurd as in like, oh, it's funny, like Munchkin or whatever, which I did not find to be very fun. Um, sorry,
Munchkin, no, I have no love for Munchkin. It's basically apples to apples
it's
for
just
me, which is another game I dislike.
it's just chaos. But
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get the appeal, the party game appeal or whatever. But anyway, what was I getting at there? Oh yeah, that the fun is sometimes some people. Well, obviously, people find different things to be fun, and so for me, there's this game. This is funny to me that um, I like I like games that that are strategy games that really make you think and all that kind of thing. But there is this game. I can't remember what it's called. All it is it's like you've rolled dice and you get a number, and on certain numbers you build a type of skyscraper, and they're just like little stackable cubes. And so you just stack up these little cubes in front of you, and then you got to get a certain match or whatever. So it's like the equivalent of Yahtzee, in terms of like the complexity and the decision making. There isn't much, but there was just something visceral about like having these little 3D objects in front of me and building it up, like playing with Legos or something. And like I just enjoyed it. Like even if like I was not making decisions, I was not making I was not responsible for winning or failing. It's like I couldn't say that I won. It's like I rolled the dice, I still just had a good time, and
Yeah.
so there's something about that.
I think this will probably be my last comment for the night, because then
Yep.
I just realized it's like 12:41. But something you could probably look into with the tanks is, so like the way I'm thinking about it is like most war games are on a macro scale. It's a battle that involves, how they refer to it, like 100-point army or like a several 100-point army, and it's multiple figures and everything.
Yeah. Yep.
It'd be interesting to see the complexity of those systems, but applied to a micro scale, where a person controls only like one unit, and that is the unit they got. Like that unit though is densely packed with game systems and game mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I guess like how Mech Warrior works, depending on the game,
Mm-hmm.
or a BattleTech, or however they want to call it, depending
Yeah.
on who owns it. Where like you have to worry about ammo or overheating, that kind of thing. Anyway, yeah, it's that could be kind of neat as a system, or as a way to play that, where instead of it being like something you have to worry about on a macro scale, where you have to feel like 10 of these tanks or 20 or whatever, is just, no, you just got your one tank you got to worry about, and you got to take out the other tanks
Yeah, I think that.
that other people are worried about too. But everyone has their one, and maybe it's kind of similar to how, have you ever had a chance to play the X-Wing miniatures game?
I have not.
It's fascinating. It's probably like the one Star Wars thing in recent memory that I was really jazzed about. It kind of had that system where but even that has that's also where it gets into a macro thing where you end up controlling bunches of ships for each side or whatever. Early on, what I found the most fascinating was like they tell you like, have an early on thing where one person controls one ship and the other person controls like two ships, because the Empire side usually is designed to be like weaker but strength in numbers.
Hmm.
Whereas the Rebel side, they're more expensive ships, but they pack a punch, so one X-Wing can hold off against two TIE fighters. But you can choose like your crew that you want, like your fighter pilot, and like what kind of loadout he wants, or what kind of loadout he has within his ship, and any kind of special maneuvers he can pull off, and that kind of thing. And I can only think of that game as like the only one in recent memory that does that,
Hmm.
where they take a thing and they only say like, hey, you can kind of scale this down and focus on only one. And even then, like they're still they only have that as like a tutorial thing where it's like, okay, once you learn the ropes, now you incorporate a squadron of X-wings
Mm.
against like two squadrons of TIE fighters, and they want you to scale it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, I think it'd be kind of neat to have it be like instead of like this big war game thing, have it be like a more tactical battle of like wits.
Yeah, I think the tactical thing is appealing to me, in part because that's the brand that we're going for with them is that they are characters, right? I mean, that's partly why I haven't depicted them with people, and I mean, I actually have done it before, but I didn't like it. That would be conventional wisdom to, put a character in there and have it ground it in scale and have it kind of give you that relatable, like, human interaction. Like you kind of live through the character, like you. That's the common wisdom. But when I put them in there, it it killed it. And what it did is it made it about the person and not about the tank. The tank was no longer like a character in this crazy world. Became um, it became an object in that world. A vehicle that something else would operate rather than something with a mind of its own. And that's very much what I wanted it to be. Was um, its own mind, right? So the personalized scale thing is something that we've kind of been playing with, or rather that. Sorry, personalized scale. What I mean is that kind of closer viewing them as characters and as like decision making things rather than machine pawns in a large conflict.
Right.
And I've got some ideas around that. I'll kind of get those out as we decide on them because some of them are like, well, maybe we'll try that, but then like maybe it won't. Maybe we'll go a different direction. But I think we have some pretty good idea of how to incorporate those ideas. But it's gonna be a lot of work. But anyway, you said that was going to be your last
Yeah, unfortunately, I'll need to get going because I have a AC person coming by tomorrow to tune up our AC before the weather gets super hot down here,
Mm-hmm.
and they have that time window of like 9 to 11, where it's like, okay,
Somewhere in there.
you're gonna come sometime between there, so I got to make sure I wake up.
That's first world problems right there, man.
Yeah. Oh, very much so.
I gotta wake up. Oh man. Sorry. All right.
Well, that and also I know my daughter has been asleep this whole time, and I know like she'll wake us up sometime in the middle of the night, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
And yeah, kids will pretty much be the alarm clock, and then I'll be really sore if I don't have enough sleep. But no, it was fantastic hanging out with you, man.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. It was, we weren't really sure how we were gonna get it going, but I thought it would be cool. I mean, I keep seeing your stuff on Instagram, and yeah, I dig it. I like what you're doing, and I like
Yeah.
that variety in it too. So I just thought, yeah, it'd be cool to do a stream together. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to do it again. Yeah, whenever you'll have me back on, I'll be down for it.
yeah, I think we'll have to get this figured out to where we're bouncing back and forth between the different screens. I have an idea how we could do that, but that's just the technical stuff. But yeah, it was a good conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks for
yeah, it was really good.
thanks for being willing to do this.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely, man.
Well, I don't really have anything other than an awkward farewell for the for the group. Usually, I just say, hey, I mean, of course, you guys watching this, I say this every time, and I want to make sure that it's that we're actually like doing it, if possible. And that is, to watch the stream is cool, and I appreciate everyone who's watching, and I definitely appreciate if you're watching just for fun and you're not really interested in making your own art, but you just want to watch it. Thank you for watching. But for those artists that are watching, that you're doing it to kind of have something as you work and as you are growing. Like, I think the best thing is to just keep working and to have a project to do along with this. This was what, just under, not quite 3.5 hours, right? And so, if you get 3.5 hours in of drawing, painting, that's some solid time to put in. So, yeah. And as always, you can reach me on Instagram, Eric Elwell Art, or check out Fantastic Tanks. That's at Fantastic Tanks on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for joining. And
I don't think I'm following that one yet.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I need to follow that one. I did not realize you had a separate account for the Fantastic Tanks.
Yeah, I separated that one. I was doing enough of that it became, again, with the whole like branding yourself online, it became like, oh, that's Tank Guy. Like when I have my friends tell me too, like, oh, what are you working on? Are you gonna paint something with guns and tanks again? I'm like, yeah, that's a project I'm working on, but I do a ton of different things.
I've got other things, yeah.
Right. So I separated it, and then and in no small part because we actually formed the LLC to make it its own business and start to control all the assets for it and stuff. So that's partly why that's separated. But, yeah, check it out. That's just Fantastic Tanks on Instagram, also on TikTok, if you're into that.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining in, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.